Hello! If you're visiting for the first time, it's fantastic to have you here. And if you're a returning listener, welcome back. This video features mostly true scary stories with the sound of gentle rain in the background. If you're looking for something to help with sleeplessness, anxiety, or stress, you're in the right place. If you enjoy the stories, I'd be grateful if you'd subscribe. Thank you for being here. Now, let's begin. Have you ever wondered what it would be like to spend a night in a haunted house? Well, grab your popcorn and settle down, because I'm about to take you on a spooky adventure straight from my own life. This is a tale filled with frightening surprises, creepy noises, and maybe even a ghost or two. And guess what? As you listen, I have something special just for you. A new weight loss dietary supplement that can help you shed those extra pounds while you snooze. Yes, you heard that right. Lose weight without lifting a finger. Click the link in the description below to learn more and start your journey. Don't forget to comment where you're listening from and subscribe for more chills and thrills. As I stepped into the old house, a chill ran down my spine. The door creaked loudly behind me, like it was warning me not to enter. Flickering lights cast long shadows on the walls, and I felt like something was watching me. The air was thick and heavy, almost like it wanted to tell me its secrets. I went deeper inside, where time seemed to stand still. Every step I took echoed in the silence, making my heart race. Suddenly, I heard a soft whisper. "Get out!" It was barely audible, but it sent chills up my back. I turned around quickly, but there was no one there. Just the darkness, wrapping around me like a cloak. I told myself it was just my imagination. After all, haunted houses always had creepy vibes, right? I moved into the living room, and my breath caught in my throat. The wallpaper was peeling, revealing signs of long-forgotten stories. An old, dusty sofa sat in the center, its fabric worn and faded. As I walked closer, I noticed a family portrait hanging crookedly on the wall. The faces in the picture seemed to twist into sinister smiles. My skin prickled, and I felt the urge to leave, but my curiosity pushed me to stay. Then, without warning, the lights flickered again, plunging me into darkness for a moment. When they returned, I gasped. The portrait was now facing the wall. I stumbled back, my heart pounding in my ears. It felt like the house was alive, playing tricks on me. I could almost hear its heartbeat, a slow, dreadful thump that filled the space around me. As I explored the hallway, the wooden floorboards creaked noisily under my feet. A gust of cold wind swept past me, carrying a low moan that echoed through the corridor. I paused, my breath catching in my throat as I noticed a faint glow coming from under a door at the far end. It was strangely inviting, but also terrifying. I hesitated for a moment, torn between my desire to uncover the mystery and my instinct to run away. Taking a deep breath, I slowly approached the door. It was slightly ajar, and I could hear a soft, rustling sound from inside. I pushed the door open, and a wave of frigid air hit me. The room was filled with strange, old furniture covered in white sheets, like ghosts waiting to be awakened. In the middle of the room stood a mirror, its surface clouded with dust. As I stepped closer, I felt a tingling sensation on my skin, like tiny fingers brushing against me. I peered into the mirror, and what I saw made my heart race. My reflection looked the same, but behind me, something was lurking. I turned around quickly, but again, there was nothing but empty space. My mind raced with fear. What was happening? Was I truly alone in this haunted house? Suddenly, a loud crash came from the kitchen, breaking the stillness. My feet froze in place, but then adrenaline kicked in. I cautiously made my way toward the sound, my heart beating like a drum. The kitchen was dimly lit, and to my surprise, a cupboard door hung open. Just then, I caught sight of a shadow darting past me out of the corner of my eye. I turned, but again, nothing was there. I felt the walls closing in, and panic started to rise. Drawing from my courage, I stepped closer to the cupboard. I could see something flickering inside, a light that felt inviting yet sinister. Taking another step, I reached into the darkness, and as I pulled out an old, dusty lantern, it lit up with a warm glow. But the moment it shone brightly, I witnessed a figure standing at the end of the hall, staring at me with hollow eyes. Fear surged through me as I dropped the lantern, its light flickering as it clattered to the floor. My instinct screamed at me to run, but I was frozen, unable to look away from the figure. It looked just like a woman dressed in old-fashioned clothes, her hair falling around her face like shadows. She tilted her head, a faint smile creeping onto her lips. I turned on my heel and dashed back into the living room, barely thinking about where I was going. The house seemed to twist and bend around me, the walls warping as I ran. I could hear whispers again, louder this time, echoing in my ears, but I couldn't make out the words. They felt urgent, like they were pleading with me to listen. The air was thick with their energy, and it felt like I was being drawn deeper into the house's secrets. I stumbled across an old staircase leading down to the basement. The smell of earth and decay wafted up, but I felt an inexplicable pull to go down. The whispers seemed to grow louder, urging me onward. Slowly, I descended, each step creaking loudly beneath me. The darkness enveloped me as I reached the bottom, my heart racing with every heartbeat that echoed in that gloom. When I finally reached the basement, I was met with a sight that took my breath away. Old, dusty items were scattered everywhere. Broken toys, fur coats that smelled musty, and a cracked mirror leaning against the wall. In the center of the room stood a small child's rocking chair, swaying back and forth on its own. My breath hitched as I watched the chair move, like a ghostly hand was pushing it. Suddenly, the chair stopped, and in the silence that followed, I heard a small giggle. It was soft, innocent, yet it sent shivers coursing through me. I scanned the room, heart pounding fiercely, searching for the source. Just then, I noticed something dart past me, a small, shadowy figure zipping around the corner. I wanted to scream, but couldn't find my voice. Instead, I took a step backward, into darkness again. Before I could think about what I was doing, I turned and ran, scrambling back up the stairs. Every step felt like a fight against my own fear. The whispers turned into urgent shouts, and I felt trapped in the haunted house, as if it were holding me hostage. I finally reached the living room again, my chest heaving as I desperately fought to catch my breath. The portrait still hung on the wall, looking even more askew than before, and it was then I realized the eyes of the figures were following me. Just when I thought I could leave, the front door slammed shut, trapping me inside. I yanked on the handle, but it wouldn't budge. Panic surged through me, and I spun around, facing the living room once more. The laughter echoed in my ears, growing louder, mixed with whispers that I couldn't quite catch. Shadows danced along the walls, and the feeling of being watched returned with a vengeance. I knew deep down that I had to uncover what was happening in this cursed place before it was too late. Would I ever make it out alive? I needed answers, and the house would reveal its secrets, whether I wanted them or not. I took a deep breath, trying to calm the storm inside me. My heart was racing, but curiosity was eating at me. I needed to figure out what was happening in this creepy house. The whispers grew louder as I heard that faint giggle again, sending chills down my spine. I glanced toward the hallway where I had seen the shadow dart. Something was there, hiding just out of sight, and I couldn't shake the feeling that it wanted me to follow. Little by little, I took a hesitant step forward, trying to keep my breath steady. It was as if the house itself was holding its breath, waiting for me to make my next move. I approached the hallway cautiously, peering into the darkness. The cold air wrapped around me, making my skin crawl. I expected something to jump out, but instead, there was just silence. The giggle echoed in my mind, teasing me. It felt like a dare, daring me to discover what lay ahead. I pushed myself to take another step, feeling the floorboard creak beneath my weight. As I ventured deeper into the dark corridor, I caught sight of shadows shifting, dancing against the walls. I rubbed my eyes, trying to dismiss the visions that were creeping into my mind. But they were real, and they seemed to be getting closer. My stomach twisted into knots, and every instinct inside me screamed to turn back. I reached a door at the end of the hallway. It was slightly ajar, and a sliver of light spilled out, beckoning me closer. I could hear the faintest sound of a lullaby coming from within, its melody both sweet and haunting. With trembling hands, I pushed the door open and stepped inside. The room was small and cramped, filled with dusty old toys scattered across the floor. A chest in the corner caught my eye, and before I could stop myself, I approached it. Just as I reached for the lid, a loud bang echoed behind me, and I whirled around, startled. The door slammed shut with a force that made the walls shake, plunging me into darkness once more. Fear coursed through me as I realized I was trapped. The lullaby continued to play softly, weaving through the tension in the air, wrapping around me like a chilling embrace. I turned back to the chest, my curiosity growing stronger than my fear. I opened it slowly, creaking with groaning in protest. Inside was an assortment of old objects, broken dolls with glassy eyes, faded clothes, and an old music box that seemed to draw me in. I picked up the music box, its surface cold in my hands. As I twisted the tiny key, the lid opened slowly, releasing a sweet, eerie tune. But as the melody played, I felt something strange happening. The air grew thicker, and shadows flickered around me. I could hear the whispers again, but this time they were clearer, almost pleading. "Play with us," they called softly, echoing in the stillness of the room. I dropped the music box, stepping back in horror. The toys on the floor began to move, as if they were alive. The dolls tilted their heads, grinning macabrely, their painted smiles frozen in time. I stumbled backward, trying to escape, my heart racing as a chorus of soft laughter filled the air. It was a mix of children's giggles and something darker, something that sent a wave of terror washing over me. Suddenly, the room began to shift. The walls seemed to close in, and I could feel the temperature dropping. I rushed toward the door, desperate to get out, but it was locked tight. It felt like the house itself was playing games with me, trapping me in this nightmare. Just when I thought it couldn't get worse, the shadows began to coalesce, forming a figure in the corner. A tall, dark silhouette loomed over me, and as it stepped closer, I could see its eyes, glowing eerily in the dim light. I wanted to scream, but no sound came out. My feet felt stuck in place, and I was frozen with fear. The whispers turned into laughter, a cacophony that twisted around me, nearly deafening. Join us, they chanted, their voices swirling like a tempest in my mind. I felt myself spiraling into panic. With one final surge of adrenaline, I hurled myself at the door, slamming my shoulder against it again and again. The laughter grew louder as the figure moved closer. My body was fueled by sheer terror now, and with one last desperate push, the door swung open. I stumbled out into the hallway, gasping for breath. The laughter faded behind me, but I could still hear faint giggles echoing through the air. I sprinted down the hall, my heart pounding, desperate to find a way out. The house felt like a maze, twisting around me like a predator stalking its prey. As I reached the staircase, I hesitated for just a moment, looking back toward the door I had just escaped. The figure stood in the shadows, its glowing eyes fixed on me, silently beckoning me to return. I turned away, forcing my trembling legs to carry me down the stairs. Each step felt like a battle against my fear, and I couldn't help but glance over my shoulder. The shadows at the top of the staircase seemed to stretch, reaching for me like ghostly hands. I felt the grip of terror tightening around me, urging me to hurry. When I reached the bottom, I looked around frantically, searching for a way to escape this nightmare. The basement loomed dark and foreboding, but I noticed a small window at the far end, glinting faintly in the light. I dashed toward it, half hoping it would lead to freedom. As I approached, I realized it was dirty and too small for me to fit through. But then I heard it, a soft thud behind me. I spun around to see the door I had just come through now ajar, swaying slightly as if inviting me back inside. I could barely process the rush of fear that consumed me, but I locked eyes with the darkness within. "Stay with us," the whisper wrapped around me. I shook my head, backing away slowly. Just then, I felt something cold brush against my arm. I whirled around, but there was nothing there. only shadows and the lingering echoes of that eerie laughter. The house was alive, and it wasn't going to let me leave without a fight. I turned back to the window, desperate for a way out. I pushed against the frame, trying to see if it could budge. To my surprise, it gave way just a bit. The thought of slipping through filled me with determination, but as I worked to open it, I felt a stark chill in the air. The darkness behind me was moving, creeping closer, and I could sense its presence wrapping around me like a shroud. I pushed harder against the window, adrenaline pumping through my veins. But just as I finally managed to pry it open wide enough to squeeze through, I heard a loud crash from the hallway. My heart dropped. There was no time to think. I had to decide fast. In that split second, I could feel the pull of the darkness behind me, insisting I stay. What would I choose? With a quick glance at the shadowy figures lurking, the laughter rising once more, I dove through the window. The cold night air hit me hard as I tumbled out, landing on the soft grass outside. I scrambled to my feet, looking back at the house just as the laughter reached a deafening crescendo. The windows were dark, the shadows swirling like a storm within. I stood frozen for a moment, heart racing, breathless, my mind reeling from what had just transpired. As I turned to run, the laughter echoed in my ears, mixing with the whispers that seemed to follow me. I could no longer see the house clearly, but I knew it was still there, waiting in the darkness. Thinking about what I experienced made my skin crawl. Questions raced through my mind. What did it want from me? Would I ever be free from that haunted night? I sprinted down the street, not daring to look back. As I ran, I swore I could still hear those eerie giggles pulling at the edges of my sanity. The horror of that night would stick with me, perhaps forever, a reminder of what lurked in the shadows. I ran down the street, my heart pounding louder than the footsteps echoing behind me. Each stride felt like a desperate attempt to escape the horrors of that night. I glanced over my shoulder, half expecting to see the dark silhouette following me, but I only caught glimpses of the house's eerie outline in the moonlight. The laughter seemed to cling to the air, weaving in and out of the rustling leaves, taunting me with every step I took. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was still being watched. As I pushed myself onward, my mind raced with questions. What did those spirits want from me? I didn't have an answer, but I felt a deep pit of dread forming in my stomach. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, I found myself in the safety of a small clearing. The world felt quieter here, the shadows receding slightly as the moon hung bright in the sky. I took a moment to catch my breath, leaning against a nearby tree, feeling its rough bark against my back. But just as I thought I had put distance between me and that house, I heard it, a soft, familiar giggle, wafting through the night air. Panic surged within me again, and I scanned the area for a sign of danger. I thought maybe I was imagining things, playing tricks on myself in the aftermath of fear. Those whispers were echoing again, threading through the trees. "Come back, come play." Shivers raced down my arms. The voices were just like before, sweet yet ominous. I shook my head, trying to clear my thoughts, and focused on my breathing. But my heart sank as the ground beneath me trembled slightly. The laughter grew louder, ringing through the night like a tune stuck in my head. I couldn't rationalize what was happening. It felt like the very air around me was filled with a presence, something otherworldly and sinister, swirling in the shadows. Suddenly, the trees around the clearing began to rustle violently, as if a storm was brewing. The moon seemed to dim, and I felt a weight pressing down on me, like fingers gripping my heart. I turned to look back toward the path I had come from, but all I saw was darkness swallowing everything with an unsettling ease. A chill wind whipped through the clearing, and it felt cold enough to cut through my skin. I took a cautious step backward, listening closely for any signs that I was alone. As the wind howled, it carried with it faint whispers that started to form shapes in the darkness, the silhouettes of children dancing in the shadows. I wanted to run, but I was frozen in place as the shadows spun and twirled in a macabre ballet. The figures pirouetted gracefully, but their faces were twisted and grotesque, their eyes hollow and void. In that moment, it hit me. They were just like the portraits in the haunted house, forever trapped in their sorrow. This realization sent waves of fear crashing over me. Suddenly, one of the figures broke from the group, floating toward me, its hollow eyes locked onto mine. I felt a mix of fascination and terror, my breath hitching in my throat as it got closer. The figure's smile stretched wide, showing an empty mouth that felt like an abyss. It reached out, its hand brushing against the edge of my mind, and I could feel the icy touch sinking into my thoughts. Visions flashed before my eyes, scenes of laughter, joy, and ultimately despair. I saw the shadows of children playing in the hallways of that old house, their giggles turning into cries of anguish. They were trapped in a cycle, forever longing for connection, while I stood as a witness to their anguish. "Help us," was the last thought that invaded my mind before I tore myself away, staggering backward, trying to escape their grasp on my soul. I stumbled, falling to the ground. The weight of their hope rested heavily on my chest, making it hard to breathe. The laughter stopped, replaced by an eerie silence that rang in my ears like an alarm bell. Quickly, I scrambled to my feet and began to sprint away from the clearing, desperate to shake off the remnants of their haunting presence. As I hurtled deeper into the woods, the trees closed in around me, their branches clawing at my skin like ghostly hands. Each shadow felt alive, shifting and moving with every heartbeat. I couldn't tell if I was still being followed, but the feeling of being watched never left me. I pushed through the underbrush, branches snapping underfoot, sending painful jolts through my legs. The darkness enveloped me, but I kept moving, driven by fear. The whispers faded into the distance, but I could still hear an echo of the child's laughter, reminding me of the unfinished tale I had left behind. A sudden rustling in the bushes made me freeze. My heart raced as I turned, scanning the trees around me. Was it another spirit? A wild animal? Or something worse? The stillness that followed amplified my fear, and I could feel my pulse hammering in my throat. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I spotted a flicker of light. I squinted, trying to make sense of it, and slowly it flickered again, illuminating the darkness. With a mix of dread and hope, I approached it. It glowed brightly, illuminating the forest just enough to reveal an old lantern hanging from a crooked branch. I reached out to grab it, and the moment I touched the cool handle, the light flared up, illuminating the area with a gentle glow. But as the light expanded, I realized the truth. It had drawn the attention of the darkness. Shadows swirled around me, morphing into familiar shapes as they began to gather. I held the lantern tightly, its light flickering as I faced the encroaching figures. They whispered in unison, their voices no longer playful, but now commanding. "You cannot escape. You belong with us." The ground trembled beneath me, and I felt a pull toward the shadows, as if they were trying to drag me back into their embrace. I clutched the lantern tighter, fighting against the tide of dread that threatened to drown me. "No!" I shouted into the abyss, summoning every ounce of strength I had left. "I'm not one of you." And with that, the lantern surged brighter, the light cutting through the darkness like a knife. The figures recoiled, their shadows flickering as they shrieked in agony. I suddenly felt empowered, the warmth of the light shielding me from their grasp. I turned and ran, my feet pounding against the earth as I focused on the glowing light ahead. The woods opened up into a clearing, and there it was, a path leading away from the darkness. Each step felt like a victory against the haunting whispers, inching me closer to freedom. I sprinted down the path, the shadows retreating behind me, their hold over me slipping away. The memories of their laughter began to fade, replaced by the sound of the wind rushing past my ears. I could feel the weight lifting, the light from the lantern guiding me away from that desolate nightmare. As I ran, I promised myself that I wouldn't look back again. I needed to escape, to leave behind the horrors of that night. But as I neared the edge of the woods, a chilling thought crept into my mind. Would I ever be truly free from the darkness that chased me? I breathed deeply, pushing forward, the path stretching before me like a lifeline. Each step felt like a battle against the tug of the shadows behind, trying to reclaim me. The lantern's light flickered in my hands, its warmth a small comfort in the chilling night. Thoughts raced through my mind, memories of laughter twisted into screams. Suddenly, the ground beneath me shifted, and I stumbled, nearly losing my balance. Confusion gripped me as I looked down. It was as if the path was alive, writhing and twisting. I quickly regained my footing and pressed on, but the sensation lingered, making every step feel uncertain. That quiet stillness of the woods gave way to whispers again. Only this time they were sharper, more insistent. "Stay with us, don't leave," they beckoned, each word piercing into my mind. The eerie voices wrapped around me like a cold blanket, threatening to pull me back into their grasp. I shook my head violently, trying to drown them out. "No!" I cried, gripping the lantern tightly, its light flickering as if sensing my fear. But the shadows were ever persistent, gathering at the edges of my vision, swirling and darting around me, teasing me. The once comforting glow of the lantern now felt inadequate. I realized that the darkness wasn't just behind me anymore. It was seeping in from all sides. I had entered deeper into the woods, and the light around me began to dim. Panic surged again as the trees loomed larger and the path narrowed, the darkness tightening like a noose. Just then, I heard a soft whimpering, echoing through the trees. Not a wild animal, but a child's voice. My heart raced as I turned toward the sound, torn between fear and compassion. The voice was frail, filled with sorrow, beckoning me. "Help me, please." Every instinct told me to run, but something in that plea made me pause. I scanned the area, trying to locate the source, my breath hitching in my throat. "Where are you?" I called out, my voice trembling, hoping against hope that it was a lost child. As if in response, the whimpering grew louder, pulling me deeper into the shadows. I took cautious steps, the lantern illuminating the path ahead, revealing twisted roots and gnarled branches reaching out like hands waiting to grab me. The air was thick with tension, each breath heavy with the weight of dread. Suddenly, I caught sight of a pale figure crouched behind a tree. My heart raced as I rushed toward it, desperate to help, but as I approached, the figure began to fade away, blending into the darkness. "No, wait! Don't go!" I shouted, reaching out toward the apparition, but it vanished before my eyes, leaving only an uneasy silence. The whispers surged again, louder this time, surrounding me. "You're too late. She's lost, just like us." I turned quickly, looking for an escape, but the trees seemed to close in, blocking my way back. The shadows flickered closer, their grotesque faces forming from the darkness, eyes wide and hungry. In a moment of sheer terror, I grabbed the lantern and swung it wildly, as if it could ward off the impending dread. The light flared brightly, and the figures recoiled momentarily, giving me a brief window to escape. Forcing myself to move, I fled deeper into the woods, my heart pounding like a drum. As I ran, the whispers became a cacophony of despair, echoing through the forest. "Join us forever." Then I stumbled into a clearing. The moon hung eerily low in the sky, casting an unsettling glow over the landscape. What I saw stopped me cold. In the center of the clearing stood an ancient stone well, its opening dark and deep, surrounded by crumbling stones and overgrown weeds. The whispers swirled around me, drawing my eyes to the well. "Look inside, she's calling for you," they urged. I felt an inexplicable pull, as if the darkness was inviting me into its depths. I edged closer, fear and curiosity battling within me. Peering over the edge, my breath caught in my throat. Faint silhouettes danced at the bottom, weaving in and out of sight. I could hear faint cries and laughter echoing up from the depths. It was a haunting lullaby mixed with eerie giggles, echoing through the still night air. "What do you want from me?" I whispered, feeling the weight of 1,000 eyes upon me, probing and prying. The darkness seemed to shift around the well as the figures below began to rise, swirling in a vortex, echoing my fears. "It's so lonely down here," came the voice again, soft yet piercing, resonating from within the depths. My heart raced, pounding in my chest as I fought the urge to let myself fall into that abyss. It felt as if the well was a portal, a gateway to another world filled with despair and longing. The ground trembled beneath me more violently now. I stumbled back, but the laughter and crying only grew louder, wrapping around me like a sinister embrace. The shadows began to pour out from the well, creeping up toward me, clawing at my ankles. I tried to shake them off, to pull myself away, but they were relentless, tugging me closer to the edge. I felt the cold grip of panic wash over me as the chanting rose to a fever pitch. "Join us forever." They seemed to chant in unison, their desperate voices pulling at the fabric of reality around me. A surge of adrenaline shot through me. I couldn't let them take me too. Clutching the lantern, I raised it high, its light burning brightly as I stepped back from the brink. "Leave me alone!" I screamed, projecting my defiance into the night. The moment my voice echoed through the clearing, the shadows hesitated. The light flickered around me, illuminating their faces, twisted and pained. They recoiled, shrieking as if scorched by the brightness. I knew I had to fight back, to escape the clawing hands of despair that wished to envelop me. With every ounce of strength, I dashed away from the well, sprinting away from the cries that now morphed into wails of anger. The moonlight guided me as I raced through the trees, following the narrow path. Each twist and turn only fueled my determination to break free from the nightmare. But deep within me, a new fear began to take root. What if I couldn't escape them? Each step I took echoed the horrors I had witnessed. The laughter and whispers twisted through my mind, mingling with the image of that child pleading for help. Would I ever find peace, or were they destined to haunt me forever? As I ran, everything around me felt entirely surreal. The trees no longer looked like trees. They were gnarled fingers reaching for me, the branches clawing at the sky. Just when I thought I was free, I saw a flicker of movement in my periphery. Heart racing, I turned to see a figure standing still among the trees. It was small, shrouded in shadows, but I could feel its gaze piercing through the darkness, locking onto me. "Help me," it whispered, voice thin like a wisp of smoke. This time, I couldn't ignore it. My heart ached for that child, tangled up in this nightmare right along with me. But as I took a step closer, I hesitated. I couldn't go back down that road. I could feel the shadows swirling around, the cries building to a crescendo. What if this was all a trap? Another chance for them to drag me down into their world. "No!" I hollered into the darkness, my voice raw with desperation. The figure flickered, wavering in place like a candle caught in the wind. I felt the weight of the eyes on me, filled with a sorrow and longing that tugged at my heart. But deep down, I knew if I got too close, I might become just like them. To save me from the darkness? Or to steal my light? I turned and ran harder now, pushing myself, my lungs burning from exertion. But the laughter pursued me still, echoing through the trees, entwined with every heart. Beat, whispering promises that made my blood run cold. Would they ever stop chasing? Suddenly, a sensation ran through me like electric shock, an urge to break free, to find light beyond the shadows. I pushed through branches, navigating the labyrinth of the forest, determined to escape the nightmare ahead. But as the shadows flared, I began to question if I could ever truly find peace from the horrors I had encountered. Would I ever truly escape the grip of darkness? I pushed onward, adrenaline fueling my every move. Each rustle in the underbrush sent jolts of panic through me. My heart raced, sending shockwaves of fear through my veins. I could feel an uncanny sensation creeping along my skin as if something was poised just out of sight, waiting for my next mistake. The shadows swirled around me, becoming thicker, more oppressive as I pressed deeper into the woods. I regretted not taking a different path, wishing I had turned back when I had the chance. But now, retreat seemed impossible. The trees pressed in around me, their limbs stretching like skeletal hands, craving something to grasp. I stumbled into a small clearing, breathless and trembling. To my surprise, a thick fog began to roll in, curling around my legs and swirling like lost spirits in the night. The air turned cold, biting into my skin, and I shivered involuntarily. It was as if the fog was trying to wrap me in its icy embrace. Then I spotted something glinting in the thick haze. It shimmered beneath the moonlight, almost beckoning me closer. Against my better judgment, I inched forward, heart racing with anticipation and dread. The fog danced around me, obscuring my vision, but I could still see a faint outline. A mirror, caked in dirt and grime, half buried in the ground. I knelt down, wiping the surface with my hand. My reflection stared back at me, distorted and twisted, eyes sunken and mouth curled in a scream. Shock coursed through me, and I blinked rapidly, trying to shake off the disorienting sensation. But as I looked closer, the surface of the mirror began to shimmer, images swirling like smoke. I saw glimpses of the woods, the dark figures and flickering lights that haunted me. Each vision grew more intense, pulling me into a trance where I couldn't look away. With every passing second, the figures danced closer, their expressions shifting from sorrow to rage. "No!" I gasped, tearing my eyes away from the mirror. But even as I broke the connection, I could feel a sinister energy radiating from it, tugging at my mind. The whispers returned, urging me to look again. "You know you wanna," they taunted. Panic surged within me. I couldn't let them pull me back in. I stumbled away from the mirror, trying to clear my mind. I felt the fog pressing in tighter, almost suffocating. I began to run again, the earth trembling beneath my feet as I dashed through the dense mist, feeling a sense of urgency grip me. Then I heard it, a low, guttural growl that made my stomach drop. I froze, fear coursing through my body like ice water. The sound echoed ominously, reverberating through the fog as the darkness shifted behind me. I turned slowly and saw a pair of glowing eyes glaring back at me from the shadows. They were fierce and piercing, a chilling reminder that I was not alone. The breath caught in my throat as the figure emerged, a massive shape cloaked in darkness, its presence heavy and foreboding. It moved closer, each step causing the ground to quake, sending waves of terror crashing over me. I wanted to flee, to escape this nightmare, but my feet felt rooted to the ground. Fear paralyzed me as the creature's eyes locked onto mine, holding me in thrall. "No, no, no," I whispered, backing away slowly, desperate to break this hypnotic gaze. In that moment, I knew I had to act. I gripped the lantern tightly, mustering every ounce of courage I had left. With one swift motion, I held it out in front of me, the light cutting through the thick fog like a beacon. The creature hesitated, its form wavering as if unsure. I could sense the fury beneath its surface, but the lantern seemed to weaken its resolve. "Stay back!" I shouted, voice trembling but defiant. The shadowy figure let out a bone-chilling roar, a sound that rattled through the very marrow of my bones. I felt the air shift, a rush of fear flowing back over me, threatening to consume my courage. And then I ran again, the sound of its growl echoing closer with every heartbeat. The trees blurred past me, their skeletal branches reaching out as if to stop me. Each breath was ragged and laced with panic. The shadows pursued me relentlessly. With adrenaline surging, I raced through the fog, darting from side to side, looking for a way to escape this unforgiving maze. But my heart sank as I realized the boundaries of my surroundings seemed to close in on me. I was trapped, the darkness wrapping tight around my limbs, pulling me back into its grasp. As I stumbled once more, I caught sight of something in the distance through the fog, an old cabin, dilapidated and shrouded in vines. Without a second thought, I made for it, my last sliver of hope. I burst through the door just as a cry erupted behind me, filling the air with dread. The door creaked ominously as I slammed it shut, leaning against it to catch my breath. The musty air inside enveloped me, thick and heavy, yet safety felt momentarily within reach. But as I controlled my breathing, I noticed the darkness creeping in through the cracks of the cabin, snaking under the door and curling around the wooden floor. It was relentless, finding its way into every corner. I glanced around the room. Rusted tools lined the walls, cobwebs draped from beams like shrouds. Dust motes floated in the air, dancing in the faint light filtering through the grimy windows. I fought against the feeling of despair settling in as I spotted an old oil lamp on the rickety table. Desperation drove me, and I rushed over, fumbling to light it. The flickering flame cast elongated shadows across the walls, a stark contrast to the overwhelming dark trying to engulf me. As I lit the lamp, the darkness recoiled, almost hissing as if the light burned it. But I knew it wouldn't hold it back forever. I pulled myself together, scanning every inch of the cabin for any means of escape. Suddenly, the soft sound of whispering floated through the air once again, now mixed with the low creaking of the cabin itself. "You can't hide," it teased, sounding as if it came from every corner, echoing around me. "You belong to us." The walls throbbed with the sound, pulsing like a heartbeat, and dread piled on my chest. I couldn't let the shadows find me. Then, from the corner of my eye, I caught sight of a door leading into a back room. With renewed urgency, I dashed toward it, determined to find refuge. My mind raced with thoughts of the past, of how I had wandered into this nightmare. I pushed the door open slowly, my heart hammering in my chest. The back room was cloaked in darkness, even darker than the rest of the cabin. But as I stepped inside, I was met with a strange sight. A circle of old dolls sat in a perfect arrangement, their eyes glazed and lifeless. They looked up at me, trapped in an eternity of silence, their expressions haunting and sorrowful. "Help us," they seemed to whisper through their glassy eyes. My heart dropped. I felt a chill run down my spine as I realized these dolls were remnants of the children lost to this darkness. They had been abandoned here, cursed to watch as others slipped into despair, just like the ones I had encountered in the woods. Shook my head, stepping back, but the air thickened with regret. The shadows surrounding me began to swirl faster, tightening their grip on my chest. I could feel an ominous weight, as if the lost spirits of the children were rising with the darkness, desperate to claim me as one of their own. I couldn't breathe, panic clawing at me as the whispers grew louder, crescendoing into a terrifying symphony of despair. "Join us! Help us!" The dolls seemed to move closer, their heads tilting toward me in unison, filled with sorrow and longing. I fought against the tide of emotions swelling inside of me, knowing I had to break away from their pull. I grabbed the lantern, its glow flashing as I lifted it high. "No, I won't go with you," I shouted, my voice pierced through the cacophony of despair that threatened to consume me. But the shadows hissed back, a chorus of angry whispers rising up to meet me. "You cannot resist forever. You will be ours." The ground beneath me trembled, and I felt the cabin itself shake, as if it was alive and merely a vessel for the spirits trapped within. And as the walls creaked, I realized the cabin might collapse under the weight of the darkness. I needed to escape. With every ounce of strength, I forced the door open, charging back into the main room. But there, standing amidst the merging shadows, was the figure I had seen before, ready to devour my very soul. In that moment, with a surge of adrenaline, I made my choice. I pushed against the freezing darkness with all I had left, blazing a path through the chaos. "I won't be yours," I cried, breaking free into the night, the cries of the lost children swirling around me. But the darkness followed, relentless and unforgiving, and I knew my fight was far from over. As I raced into the night, I could hear the whispers fading back into the trees, but now they were tainted with anger and betrayal. The battle had only just begun, and I could feel the shadows coiling, plotting my return. Where would this chase lead me next? Would I find freedom, or become another lost soul destined to linger in the void? Each step I took felt heavy, weighed down by a growing dread. The cold air pressed against my back, urging me forward, but the whispers clung to me like a shroud. With every heartbeat, the darkness tightened its grip, a relentless reminder that I had not escaped its grasp. The path ahead twisted and turned, narrowed by the shadows that lurked just beyond the perimeter of my lantern's glow. I could see murky shapes darting in the periphery of my vision, phantoms of my imagination merging with the creeping fog. I had just escaped one threat, but what awaited me now? Panic quickly turned to resolve as I moved deeper into the chilling embrace of the woods. I needed to find a way out, some sign of civilization or daylight. Everything around me felt foreign and alive, each rustle in the underbrush taunting me with echoes of laughter and long-lost cries. It was as if the very forest was conspiring against me. Then, out of the darkness, a low moan reached my ears. It slithered through the air like a serpent, chilling me to the core. I turned abruptly, clutching the lantern tightly against my chest, heart racing as I scanned my surroundings, searching for the source. There, at the foot of a massive, gnarled tree, lay a figure. A small child, their face obscured by thick strands of shadowy hair, sat crumpled beneath the roots. My heart clenched at the sight. This wasn't another illusion, was it? "Help me," the figure implored, voice shaky and laced with despair. The way they whispered that single plea pulled at my heartstrings, freezing me in place. A rush of emotions flooded my senses. I took a cautious step closer, intrigued and terrified. "Are you real?" I managed to stammer, my voice barely above a whisper. The figure lifted its head slightly, eyes shimmering like twin stars lost in a sea of darkness. "They took my friends," it said, voice hauntingly soft yet resonant. "They want you too." A shudder rippled through me, and every instinct screamed to run. I had witnessed too much already. I couldn't let myself be trapped in this endless cycle of misery and despair. Yet, there was a piece of me that longed to help, to rescue whatever hope still lingered within this ghastly place. "Where are your friends?" I asked, trying to maintain some sense of calm, while the air thickened with uncertainty. "The well," the child replied, their gaze flickering toward the shadows. "They're waiting. You must come." My heart raced as dread washed over me again. The well was where it had all begun, the source of the darkness I had narrowly escaped. "I can't go back there," I stammered, steeling myself against the urge to run, images of despair flooding my mind. But the hollow darkness within the child's eyes deepened, and I could feel a weight pressing down on me, urging me closer. "You have to," they whispered, and something within me flickered, a sense of duty mixed with fear. Before I could reconsider, I turned and began to navigate the winding path back toward the well, retracing steps I had fought so hard to break free from. The journey back felt different, the atmosphere more charged with foreboding. I could feel the whispers swirling around me, like a tempest, growing louder and more chaotic, drowning out my thoughts. "You're lost," they chanted. "You cannot escape." As I stepped into the clearing, the well loomed before me, an ancient structure of stone and despair. Its opening gaped like a mouth ready to swallow me whole. The shadows danced around it, taller and more grotesque than before, flickering like candles in a suffocating wind. I hesitated, my breath hitching in my throat as I turned to look back at the child, who now stood beside me. "You must look," they said, voice barely a whisper, trembling with a strange mix of hope and trepidation. "What do you mean?" I asked, dread curling in the pit of my stomach. "They're waiting for you," the child replied, stepping closer to the edge. "You'll see." Reluctantly, I followed their gaze and leaned over the well. My heartbeat thundered in my ears as I peered into the darkness, the void extending endlessly beneath me. For a moment, I saw nothing but black, a swirling abyss that seemed to pulse with life. Then, shapes began to form within the darkness. Faint shadows of children reaching out from the depths, faces twisted in anguish, eyes filled with longing. They looked up at me, silent screams echoing in my mind. Their cries tangled with the wind, filling the clearing with a haunting melody of despair. No! The word ripped from my throat as I staggered back, almost losing my balance. The shadows surged upward, tendrils of darkness creeping along my feet, cold and clammy. In an instant, the child beside me transformed, their features twisting into something grotesque, a reflection of all the lost souls from the well. "Join us," it hissed, its voice now echoing with the cries of many. "You're one of us now." The air thickened with dread as I stumbled backward, desperate to escape the twisted figure. The ground felt unsteady, and my lantern flickered violently, battling against the encroaching darkness. With every heartbeat, I felt the shadows tugging at me, their icy fingers wrapping around my ankles, pulling me closer to the well. "Fight it!" I screamed at myself, pushing through the relentless pull. I flung the lantern toward the well, desperate to ignite the darkness. It crashed against the stones, the glass shattering and releasing a cascade of light that exploded outward. The shadows recoiled, howling in agony, and the figures in the well writhed, retreating into the depths with whispered cries of anguish. The moment of light bathed the clearing in a surreal glow, illuminating the horror around me. The child's visage cracked beneath the light, exposing a hollow shell. "You can't escape. You belong with us," it screeched, its wicked form taking shape once again. The terror surged within me, a fierce determination igniting my spirit. I had to be strong to stand against this darkness. As the child reached out with claw-like hands, I stumbled backward, my mind racing for an escape. "Get away from me!" I shouted, steeling my heart. I could feel my determination coursing through my veins as I took off once more into the trees. The shadows howled behind me, shrieks rising to a fever pitch as I pushed forward. The fog swirled, clouding my vision, but I focused on moving, on getting away from the nightmare that threatened to consume me. With each desperate step, I could feel the pull of the darkness behind me, but I pressed on, knowing I could not let it win. I could hear the children's cries swelling, the cacophony of their desperate pleas echoing through the woods. "Help us," they wailed. "It's too late." But I refused to listen. I wouldn't let their despair envelop me. I reached a clearing where the trees thinned out ahead, revealing a faint glimmer of light shining in the distance. Hope surged anew within my chest. I surged forward, heart racing with anticipation and fear. Just as I neared the edge of the clearing, I glanced back and saw the shadows spilling forth from the woods like a suffocating mist, creeping closer and closer, hungry for me. "No!" I shouted into the void, breaking through the boundary of fear. The light grew brighter ahead, shimmering through the trees, promising safety, salvation. I sprinted toward it with everything I had left, the darkness clawing and tugging in my back like a desperate lover. But I crossed the threshold of light, bursting into the clearing, where the air felt different, crisp and refreshing. Yet, as I turned to face the darkness, I felt the presence of something looming in the shadows. The darkness pulsed ominously, swirling with anger, and from within, a figure began to take shape, one that sent chills racing down my spine. It was the embodiment of my fears, a twisted reflection of what I had encountered before, ready to drag me back into the depths of despair. "No, I will not be taken," I yelled, gathering every ounce of strength to stand my ground. As it advanced toward me, I raised my arms, summoning the last flicker of hope I had left. I could sense the shadows tightening around me, whispering cruel reminders of my past, but my resolve fortified. With a surge of energy, I called forth the light from my heart, an echo of the lantern that guided my way. It pulsed outward, forcing the shadows to retreat, illuminating the clearing and pushing against the encroaching darkness. The figure hesitated, a crackling energy sparking between us. "You cannot escape your fate," it bellowed, anger twisting its form as if it were being torn asunder. But I stood firm, creating a barrier, holding the light close. "I am not yours. I choose to break free." The light glimmered at my command, expanding outward like a beacon the shadows dreaded. With a guttural roar, the figure lunged for me, but was met with the brilliance that surged from within. The woods around me erupted in a blinding flash, and in that moment, everything changed. The darkness recoiled, hissing and screeching as the shadows dissipated, reducing the grotesque figure to nothing more than echoes in the wind. I collapsed to the ground, gasping for breath, my body trembling from the weight of what I had faced. But the whispers began to fade, replaced by the soft rustle of leaves and the distant sound of water flowing. I blinked against the light, my heart still racing, but gradually, the world around me began to settle. I was free, or at least I hoped to be. Yet, even as the darkness receded, the chilling realization lingered. It could always come back. No matter how far I ran, I carried the weight of its legacy within me. As I rose to my feet, the forest felt different. An underlying sense of foreboding remained, like a shadow lurking just out of sight. This was my reality now, a watchful presence, a struggle against the darkness that would never truly fade away. But I would fight. I would not let it claim me again. As I stood there, trembling but resolute, I took in the strange silence that enveloped the clearing. The once oppressive atmosphere had lifted slightly, but my mind raced with too many questions. What if the darkness was just biding its time? What if this reprieve was temporary, a cruel joke played by forces far beyond my understanding? I turned back toward the woods. The shadows beyond the treelines still moved, but something felt different. They no longer aimed to drag me under, but twisted and coiled like restless serpents, seemingly waiting for the right moment to strike. The air felt charged with an unsettling energy, as if the forest had its own heartbeat, slow and deliberate, thumping in tandem with my own pulsing fear. Suddenly, I noticed the ground beneath me was uneven, the vibrant greenery around the clearing giving way to patches of gray, bare earth. As I stepped forward, my foot sank deeper, as if the earth beneath my feet was trying to swallow me whole. Panic gripped me, and I willed myself to stay calm. I needed to keep moving, to find a way to break free of this nightmare completely. As I began to retrace my steps back toward the main path, a low sound echoed through the woods, a deep growl that resonated like a warning. The sound crawled up my spine, prickling my skin. I froze, listening intently, heart thumping wildly in my chest. I could barely breathe, the tension thick enough to slice with a knife. "Who's there?" I called out, but my voice sounded small and insignificant in the vastness of the forest. The only response was the rustling of leaves, a whisper of movement that sent chills through me. I forced myself to move, but my legs felt like lead. The growl came again, closer this time, reverberating through the trees, an omen that something was hunting me with sinister intent. I bolted, pushing through the underbrush, twigs and branches tearing at my clothes. I could hear it now, whatever was behind me, crashing through the trees with an urgency that echoed my own desperation. A deep instinct screamed for me to run faster, every decision now driven by pure survival. Suddenly, I broke through the thick growth and found myself beside an old stone wall, crumbling and overrun with vines. My heart sunk as I realized I had stumbled into ruins that looked like an abandoned village. The air was thick with decay, and an eerie quiet settled over the land, broken only by the grating sound of my breath, heavy and labored. As I looked around, I felt the shadows creeping in again, swirling like a storm cloud overhead. The buildings, dilapidated and covered in moss, looked as though they had been lost to time. Hell, I wondered how long it had been since anyone had walked here. And then I saw them. Figures standing in the doorways of the broken buildings, their features shrouded in darkness, but watching me. I could feel the weight of their gazes, piercing through the shadows. My breath quickened again, panic threatening to drown me. They resembled the children I had seen earlier, twisted apparitions clinging to the remnants of their past. "Help us," they whispered in unison, 100 voices layered over one. Another, drifting on the wind like a haunting lullaby. "You must join us." A shiver coursed through my body, mixed with a morbid fascination. I shook my head violently, not wanting to be pulled back into this nightmare. I can't! I can't! I yelled, my voice cracking. The figures moved closer, their forms blurring at the edges, growing more pronounced with each anguished plea. I turned and sprinted toward the nearest exit of the village, desperate to escape, the shadows in pursuit with an unyielding hunger. As I fled, the ground twisted beneath me, roots and vines reaching out like grasping hands, trying to tether me to this cursed place. I saw a glimpse of the well far in the distance and felt a sudden urge to return, as if led by an unseen force pulling at my very soul. I stumbled, nearly falling as I rounded a corner, breathless and disoriented. But I knew I had to beat the darkness. I had to regain control over my own fate, and I wouldn't let it take me again. Suddenly, a scream shattered the air, raw and desperate, and I froze. It was a sound that pierced the very fabric of night, and I felt it echo inside me, reverberating against my bones. Heat rushed through my body, as if the scream alone could ignite every hidden fear lurking in the shadows of my mind. I tore my gaze toward its source, a nearby building, the doorway yawning wide. There I saw a flicker of movement, an indistinct shape trembling in the shadows. "Help! Someone, please!" The voice cried again, sounding weak and utterly helpless. There was a flicker of hope within me. Was this a true soul in need or another trap? I fought with myself, to stay or to go. My feet betrayed me, inching forward, drawn to the plea like a moth to a flame. As I approached, the light from my lantern illuminated the doorway's edge, casting long, eerie shadows along the ground. Peering inside, I saw a figure, a girl, pale and with tangled hair, hunched against the wall as if she had been trapped there for ages. Her gaze locked onto mine, wide and fearful, as if I was her last hope. "Please, you have to help me." I stepped closer, compelled by her desperation. "What happened?" I asked, keeping my voice steady even as the darkness seemed to pulse behind me, hungry for the fear surrounding me. "They won't let me go. They're everywhere lurking. Please, I just want to be free." Her voice trembled, cracking under the weight of despair. I could see the shadows behind her, writhing, taking shape, ready to consume everything in their path. Just then, the outlines of figures appeared behind her, twisted silhouettes, rising with malicious intent, ready to drag her back into the void. "Join us," they chanted in unison, their chorus echoing around me. My heart raced as dread washed over me again, a wave pulling me to the edge of insanity. "No, you're wrong," I shouted into the void, standing my ground. "You won't take her." The darkness recoiled at my words, and I felt a surge of defiance flooding through me, igniting a flicker of light that burned strong. Without thinking, I lunged forward, grabbing the girl's hand, pulling her roughly into the light of my lantern. "We can escape. Come with me," I urged, adrenaline pumping through my veins as I felt the shadows recede, fighting against their pull. But the whispering figures surged forward, an unrelenting wave of darkness that knocked the breath from my lungs. "You can't save her. She belongs to us." Panic surged through my heart as I reeled backwards, my thoughts racing. I couldn't let them win. Couldn't let this fear take root in my mind. I raised the lantern high, its light burning brightly in the choking shadows. "We will be free," I called out, and in that moment there was an explosion of energy. Light erupted from the lantern, driving back the encroaching darkness, illuminating the room around us. The girl's eyes widened, and I felt a connection between us, two souls fighting against a darkness that sought to consume us whole. "I won't let them have you," I screamed as I flung the lantern toward the well, the glow illuminating everything, shattering the hold the shadows had on us. With a deafening roar, the figures shrieked and pulled back, their cries intertwining with the radiance of the lantern. Everything dissolved into light, the world becoming a blur of brightness, suspending us in a moment of hope amid the tempest of despair. As the brightness enveloped us, I screamed again, You will not take her." And for a heartbeat, time stood still, and the shadows receded, leaving behind silence. But I could feel them lurking at the edges, waiting for the moment to strike again, ready to reclaim what they believed was theirs. And as the light began to fade, I knew this wasn't the end. This was just the beginning of my fight against the darkness, against the terror that sought to reclaim me and all that I dared to rescue. I held onto the girl's hand firmly, sensing that whatever lay ahead, we would face it together. As the blinding light began to wane, I felt the pull of reality pressing down on me again, the oppressive darkness waiting just beyond the fringes of our refuge. The girl clung to my hand, her grip trembling, her fears echoing in the air like a chilling wind. I could see the raw desperation in her eyes. "Why are they so angry?" she whispered, her voice barely rising above a breath. I could hardly comprehend the question, my heart still racing from the near escape. It made me wonder what horror she had faced, what pain these shadows had wrought upon her soul. They want us," I stammered, glancing over my shoulder, feeling the weight of dread creeping closer. "They want to pull us back." The realization that we were not safe, yet sent panic coursing through me, each heartbeat echoing like a war drum, urging me to move. I scanned the ruins around us. The thrill of the escaping light felt fleeting, and the shadows twisted back hungrily, like a predator circling its prey. "Come on," I urged, pulling her toward an adjacent building, half hopeful it might offer us some semblance of shelter. The doorway gaped open like a gullet, dark and unwelcoming. The girl hesitated, glancing back toward the light where the shadows retreated, whispering their promises of despair in a soft chorus. "No!" I shouted, sensing their insatiable hunger rising again as they coiled around the edges, creeping toward us with malicious intent. With a surge of adrenaline, I dragged her inside, the cool air wrapping around us like a blanket. The interior was dim, yet the faint outline of crumbling walls offered refuge from the oppressive darkness outside. To our left, there was an old staircase, spiraling upward into total blackness. "What should we do?" she asked, fear tinged in her voice, her wide eyes darting around the room. It was almost eerie how quiet this place seemed, in stark contrast to the chaos outside. I could still feel the shadows clawing at the walls, whispering with a dreadful urgency. "We have to go up," I decided, glancing between the stairs and the door we had just entered. I could sense that staying grounded would only invite more danger. Steeling myself, I led the way, my heart racing as if the ghosts of this village were walking behind me. As we climbed higher, each step felt heavier, the silence pressing in on us like an unseen weight. The shadows hung heavily in the corners, reminding me of the figures from before, lurking just outside of sight. Halfway up, I paused to sweep a glare back down, checking for any signs of pursuit. They were there, lurking at the base of the stairs, their forms shifting with impatience. The low growl from earlier rumbled anew, a threat lingering in the heavy air. "Keep moving," I said, bracing myself against a wave of dread. My instincts screamed for me to hurry, but the girl needed time. Once we reached the top, we found ourselves in a small, dimly lit chamber. Dust hung in the air, motes swirling like whispered secrets. Old furniture lay strewn about, and the floorboards creaked under the weight of forgotten memories. "I don't like it here," she murmured, her voice breaking the tranquil unease. I felt her fear wash over me, wrapping around my spine like a cold hand. The shadows swirled just outside our sanctuary, their persistent whispers flooding back in. With no good options remaining, I stepped cautiously to a grimy window at the far end and peered through. The world outside was unlike anything I had seen before. The entire landscape twisted, distorted under a blanket of fog that swallowed everything whole. Trees loomed like twisted giants, their branches reaching toward us as if grasping to pull us back into the abyss. That's when I noticed them, figures moving amidst the trees, shifting with a purpose, as if searching for us. My heart raced as I recognized them as the children from before, their forms now restless and angry, faces obscured by shadows. Help us! You can't hide, they cried, their voices mingling like a chorus of lost souls. They know we're here. I gasped, stepping back from the window as adrenaline coursed through me. We need to find a way out. The girl's lips quivered with fear, and I could see the confusion etched into her pale features. How? She stammered, panic rising. Before I could respond, the air around us thickened, a heavy pressure pulling tight as the shadows pooled beneath the door like a mass of living darkness, threatening to seep in. We can't stay here, I shouted, grabbing her hand again. We turned to the only other door in the room, deep dread pooling in my gut. What lay beyond it was a mystery I was both desperate and anxious to uncover. When I flung open the door, I was met with an expansive blackness, the air heavy like a storm ready to unleash its fury. It was a long hallway, labyrinthine, littered with the detritus of long-forgotten lives. The floor beneath my feet felt slick, as though something seeped from the walls themselves, an oily residue clinging to the soles of my shoes. I don't think we should go down there, the girl whispered, her voice quaking. But the growling from the stairwell intensified outside, a deeply unsettling sound that resonated against the walls, urging us forward, urging me to confront whatever awaited in the dark. We don't have a choice, I insisted, my voice now firm, bolstered by a sudden resolve. I took a cautious step into the hallway, and she followed closely, her breath hitching as the darkness enveloped us. With each step, I could feel the atmosphere shift, a suffocating pressure weighing heavier, as if the shadows were alive, watching, waiting for us to stumble. I sensed figures lurking just beyond the edges of the shadows, their shapes solidifying, bodies vaguely defined, whispering and swaying with a malevolent cadence. "We know you're here," they sang in soft, taunting voices. "You can't escape what you truly are." Every word sent chills racing down my spine. I picked up my pace, urging the girl along, my mind racing with thoughts of survival. There was an end to this hallway. That much I could sense, but the questions loomed larger. What lay at the end? Would it be salvation or more darkness? As we darted deeper, the walls began to close in, the air thickening with the acrid scent of decay. Shadows reached out, curling toward us like grasping fingers, desperate to pull us deeper. The chill in the air made the hairs on my arms stand on end, and I could hear the whispers now more clearly, an agonizing chorus of voices echoing against the damp stone. "You belong to us. You will never leave." Their words struck hard, hammering at my sanity. "No!" I shouted, breaking through the groundless fear threatening to pull me under. I could feel the girl's presence next to me, her resolve lifting me, but the shadows fought relentlessly against our defiance, clawing at our heels with an urgency that made my skin crawl. "We're almost there," I shouted, desperate to reach the end. I could see a light flickering in the distance, a glimmer of hope fighting against the omnipresent darkness. With each hurried step, we closed the distance, but the figures behind us surged forward, a wave of despair and anger. "Join us," they screamed, their voices blending into a nightmarish wail that echoed through the hollow space. The shadows lunged, clawing and grasping, as I felt their cold, dead fingers brush against my back, sending a jolt of fear racing through my veins. "Just a little further," I urged, as the girl and I broke into a sprint, the light drawing us ever closer as the chilling cries of the shadows faded into the distant gloom. I pushed through the fear, refusing to succumb to the clutches of despair, willing my legs to move faster as the light wrapped around us. The door at the end of the hallway loomed ever closer, an escape route that promised safety. But darkness surged behind us, relentless, hungry, threatening to swallow us whole at any moment. "Run!" I shouted, summoning every fragment of determination within me. With a final lunge, we broke through the doorway, spilling out into the open air, the light from outside flooding over us like a warm embrace. But as we stumbled into the light, reality shifted bizarrely. The landscape transformed before my eyes, the familiar crystalline glow replaced with a scene of chaos. a realm torn between life and death, populated by twisted shadows that seemed to vibrate and pulsate, as if they were waiting for us. And it was then I understood. We weren't quite free yet. I stumbled into the new world, the cool air washing over my face, but it was far from comforting. Instead, an uneasy chill crept along my spine, raising goosebumps across my skin. The landscape stretched out before me like a warped dream. Trees with gnarled limbs twisted into unnatural shapes reached toward the sky, their bark blackened, leaves hanging like ghostly tongues. The girl next to me clutched my hand tighter, fear radiating off her in waves. "Where are we?" she whispered, her voice quaking. I turned my gaze away from the unsettling view, my heart racing at the possibility of being trapped in another nightmare, a realm inhabited by shadows seeking revenge. "I don't know, but we have to stay alert," I replied, forcing myself to sound braver than I felt. The light we had followed flickered and began to fade, swallowed by the deformities of this nightmarish landscape. The shadows slithered closer, inching their way between the trees and creeping beneath the twisted roots, ever watchful of our every movement. Every second felt like an eternity as I surveyed our surroundings, panic bubbling beneath the surface. Where should we go? The oppressive air seemed to smother us, thick with foreboding. For a moment, time hung suspended. Then I caught a glimpse of something far off, a silhouette darting between the trees. "Did you see that?" I asked, my voice barely breaking through the stillness, quickening our pulse as I gripped the girl's hand tighter. "See what?" she replied, anxiety tightening her features. I pointed, straining my eyes to get another glimpse. The figure disappeared, swallowed whole by the shadows, leaving behind nothing but an echo of cold energy and dread. "I saw someone," I protested instinctively, Veli stepping forward, desperate to make sense of it all. "We might not be alone," but as I turned toward her, I noticed she was staring wide-eyed at something behind me. That was when I felt it, a cold breath, brushing against my neck like an icy serpent. The sensation froze me in place. "Run!" I shouted, adrenaline surging as I instinctively pulled her with me. We darted into the underbrush, the girl stumbling behind me as we navigated the tangled roots and weeds that threatened to trip us at every turn. In the distance, I could hear them, the shadows, hissing, whispering our names in a blend of malice and despair. The air became thick, heavy, wrapping around us like a living shroud, pulling us deeper into the nightmare. I dared a glance over my shoulder and saw forms rising from the ground, shadows creeping along the soil like smoke, undulating and alive. Their faces morphed and blurred, but their eyes glowed with a sinister hunger. I squeezed the girl's hand as we ran, her breath desperate and shaky against my ear. I can't keep up," she gasped, voice cracking under pressure. I could feel her fear dragging at me, intertwining with my own rising panic. "We have to keep going," I urged, digging deeper within myself to find the strength, embracing the storm of dread building in my gut. I needed to protect her and myself. We burst through a thick patch of trees and found ourselves near a decrepit old cabin, its structure crumbling and half-buried beneath the witching vines that clamored around it like desperate hands. The windows, black and hollow, seemed to plead for us not to approach, but the shadows behind us were relentless. "We can't go in there," she said, glancing back as the twisted forms appeared closer than before. The shadows writhed, their forms becoming clearer, eyes glowing like dying embers. But there was little choice as I pushed the door open, its rusted hinges letting out a mournful creak, echoing through the thickening air. As we stepped inside, the heaviness clung to us, wrapping tighter around our throats. Dust motes floated lazily in the faint sunlight, filtering through broken panes, and the smell, an acrid mix of decay and rot, filled my nostrils, making me gag. The room was a jumble of half-fallen furniture, old photographs hanging crookedly on the walls, faces obscured by shadow. I felt those eyes watching us. Even here, their presence thickening the air. "We shouldn't be here," the girl whimpered, her voice trembling. It feels wrong. I know, I murmured, shaking away the feeling of despair that ensnared me. Shadows clawed at the edges of our sanctuary, creeping inside as they whispered our names, an invitation to despair. But we can't go back out there. We need to catch our breath. We found a huddled corner, crouching behind a rickety table that had seen too many forgotten days. I could feel her heart racing, thumping against my own in wild synchronization, unsteady yet strangely comforting amidst the chaos. Somehow, I knew we had to confront whatever malevolent force lingered here. I couldn't shake the feeling that the answers lay hidden within these walls. "What is this place?" I finally whispered, my voice trembling like the old wood creaking beside me. But before I could decide, a sudden noise made my heart drop into my stomach, a low rumbling, echoing through the walls, vibrating like a distant thunder. Dust cascaded from the ceiling, and I pressed an ear to the floor, sensing movement beneath. "What's happening?" she asked, voice barely above a whisper, eyes wide with fear. "I don't know. Something's coming," I admitted, keeping my voice steady even as panic clawed at my throat. The shadows outside grew still, hanging in the air as if waiting for something inevitable. Suddenly, the floorboards beneath us creaked louder. A shadow surged from below, rising like smoke, spilling upward until it formed a shape. A figure cloaked in darkness, its edges flickering like candlelight. "Who disturbs our rest?" it hissed, voice echoing around me like a long-forgotten whisper in the night. The sound sent chills racing through my bones. I swallowed hard. "We mean no harm," I managed, holding the girl's hand in a death grip. When the shadow moved closer, I could almost see its features. A face twisted in anguish, eyes hollow, yet filled with a terrible longing. "You have come seeking answers, have you not?" it taunted, its breath wrapping around me like icy tendrils. I glanced at the girl and saw the fear reflecting in her eyes. "Answers about what?" I called back, heart hammering against my chest. "About the lost, the forgotten," the figure replied, growing more vivid as if sucking the very light from the room. "We have waited for someone brave enough to enter. Join us. Reveal what you fear." A horrifying realization struck me as the shadows danced around me, whispering my deepest secrets, the things I buried far beneath the surface. The past threatened to unravel. "No, I won't," I screamed, backing away as the shadows surged ahead, pulling my thoughts from the recesses of my mind, exposing vulnerabilities I had tried so hard to bury. With renewed determination, I turned and sprinted from the corner, blindly pushing past the dark figure, trying to escape the shadows that clawed and grasped like desperate hands. "Come on," I gasped, tugging the girl along with me. We dashed toward the exit, but the doorway seemed to elongate, the shadows swirling around it, shifting into a wall of darkness meant to trap us for eternity. "Help us! You can help us!" they cried, voices mingling with a haunting melody that grew louder with each desperate step I took. I could hear the whispers intensifying, threatening to pull us into hopelessness, echoes of lost souls rising around us. "Hold on!" I shouted, my vision narrowing as the darkness closed in around us. My chest tightened with dread. "We have to break through!" Heart racing, I slammed my shoulder against the door, feeling it push against the shadows clamoring to hold us in place. Just as I thought we might be trapped forever, there was a crack of light, a thin beam cutting through the oppressive darkness. With a final surge of energy, I pushed through the door, the girl right by my side, and stepped into the blinding sunlight. But the shadows weren't far behind. A dark cloud lurched toward us, shrieking, determined to reclaim what it had lost. "Run! Don't look back!" I yelled, my heart pounding as the open ground came into view. I didn't dare glance behind me, even as the sinister cries echoed, promising torment and despair. We didn't stop until we reached the tree-line, a barrier separating us from the unknown. I could feel the air shift. The uncertainty pressed in on all sides, the shadows leering just beyond the trees, their whispers clawing at the edges of my sanity. A familiar sense of dread hung over me, the fear that we had escaped one nightmare only to fall into another. But I refused to let that hold me back. Together, we continued into an uncertain future, determined to escape the darkness that sought to consume us. As we broke through the trees and found ourselves on yet another open path, I knew I had to confront whatever awaited us next, whatever lay behind the veil of shadows that still lingered at our backs. "Stay close," I said, my voice trembling slightly. I couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. The true horror of our journey awaited, ready to unfold in ways we couldn't yet imagine. With each step, I felt the pulse of the unknown tugging at me, the darkness still breathing behind, eager to reclaim us. I tightened my grip around the girl's hand, knowing that whatever came next, we would have to face it together. Each step we took felt like a descent into madness. The air became heavier, thick with an unsettling energy that made it hard to breathe. The trees loomed around us, their twisted branches gnarled like skeletal fingers stretching toward the sky, as if beckoning us deeper into the unknown. As we walked, I began to hear low murmurs, whispers curling around us like smoke, almost as if the forest itself was alive and conspiring against us. It was then that I noticed strange markings on the bark of the trees, symbols etched into the wood that seemed to pulse with a faint, eerie glow. They flickered as I passed, their light a beckoning invitation to uncover long-buried truths. "Do you see that?" I asked, pointing to the closest tree. The girl nodded, her face pale, eyes wide with fear. "I don't like it here," she replied, the quiver in her voice betraying her terror. I knew we had to move on. Behind us, the shadows had not relented, their presence still palpable, still threatening to pull us back into their embrace. Pushing forward, we ventured down a narrow path that twisted like a serpent, each turn leading us further into the depths of the forest. The sounds of the world faded behind us, leaving only the rustle of leaves and our hurried breaths. But even these noises felt wrong, disjointed, as if the woods were recording our footsteps and replaying them, mocking our attempts to escape. Suddenly, I felt it, a creeping sensation dancing along my spine. Goosebumps prickled my arms. Unseen eyes seemed to watch us from the shadows, waiting, calculating. I glanced over my shoulder, just in time to catch a fleeting glimpse of a dark figure vanishing behind a tree, leaving a lingering chill in its wake. "Did you see that?" I whispered, dread pooling in my stomach. "I don't want to look back," she replied, trembling. We pressed on, urgency fueling our legs, but the whispers grew louder, swirling around us in a cacophony that was neither teasing nor inviting. It was a warning, a reminder that the darkness had not forgotten us. Just as I thought we might find a clearing, the path ended abruptly at a decrepit stone altar, slathered in moss and half-buried by roots. It loomed like some ancient relic, an offering ground for spirits long gone. Scratches marred its surface, as if desperate hands had clawed for escape or tried to etch their cries into the stone. I felt a cold breeze wash over us, brushing against my skin, and I shuddered. "Do you think we should investigate?" she asked hesitantly. As much as I wanted to say no, I felt drawn to the altar. It shimmered under the thin rays of light breaking through the canopy above, a silver glint catching my attention. I stepped closer, intrigued despite the gnawing unease in my gut. When I reached the altar, I found more symbols carved into the stone, symbols that mirrored those on the trees, spirals and jagged lines that seemed to tell a story. As I traced the patterns with my fingertips, a tremor shot through my body. The air in the clearing thickened, and the ground began to vibrate beneath me, sending a shock wave straight through my bones. "We should go," the girl urged, her voice rising in pitch, panic slicing through the calm. But before I could respond, the altar shuddered, as if awakening from a deep slumber. A low rumble echoed around us, and the shadows coiled tighter, wrapping themselves around the trees, intertwining like serpents. I jerked back, pulling her away as the earth beneath the altar cracked open, a dark abyss yawning wide to swallow anything in its vicinity. As the chasm widened, an unsettling wail rose from the depths, a sound so anguished it was like the cries of those long lost to the darkness. It felt as if the very ground was mourning, mourning for souls trapped and tormented, longing for release. "We can't stay here," I said, fear pushing me into motion. Just as I turned to head back down the path, I froze. From the chasm, a figure emerged, legs formed from shadow and eyes glowing with an unnatural light. Its features were blurred, shifting like smoke, but the essence was unmistakable. A woman, her face twisted in despair and rage, a figure of sorrow reaching out toward us as if pleading for help, yet at the same time threatening to consume us in her grief. "Help me," she croaked, voice echoing hollowly, dripping with pain. "Release me from this place." "No," I shouted, stepping back. My mind raced. There was nothing I could do. I grabbed the girl's hand and sprinted, knowing we had to escape the grasp of her misery. Every instinct screamed to flee. The shadows surged behind us, melding with the wailing figure, chasing us with a fervor. Branches whipped at us, and the forest seemed to twist, convulsing as if trying to reshape itself to trap us. As we dashed through the trees, I could hear the fading whispers growing louder, forming words in an ancient tongue. A language of sorrow and longing echoed in the rustling leaves. "Stay, join us. We will not forget you." I forced myself to keep running, the urgency in my chest igniting like wildfire. I dared another glance back. Heart thundered at the sight. The woman had grown more substantial, her form no longer formless, but an apparition, an embodiment of despair that beckoned us to return. She stretched her arms wide, a hollow smile carved across her face, one that revealed too many sharp teeth glinting ominously in the dark. "Stay with us," she cried, the words reverberating through the trees, echoing in my ears, weaving their way into my mind. I wanted to shut my eyes, block out the darkness and the sound, but I couldn't. Not now. Focused on the path ahead, I turned toward the flickering light that began to shine through the thick brush. It pulsed like a heartbeat, promising safety a way out. "With me!" I shouted, guiding the girl as we picked up speed, propelled by sheer determination. The air thickened around us as we raced toward the light, shadows clawing at our heels, angered wails following like a storm. As we broke through the last line of trees into an open space, I gasped at the sight. A clearing illuminated with glowing crystals jutting from the ground, their light bright enough to fend off the encroaching darkness. The beauty masked the danger, yet I sensed a fearsome presence lingering, pushing away the shadows, but not for long. "Look!" I pointed to the largest crystal in the center, radiant and bright. Its light pulsed gently, casting ethereal patterns around us, the glow almost soothing in the midst of chaos. "It feels wrong," the girl said, hesitating at the edge of the clearing. I took a step forward, compelled by instinct to approach the crystal. "We can't let the shadows hold us. This might be our only chance." But as I stepped closer, the whispers returned, gentler now, like a lullaby weaving through the air. "Come here. We will keep you safe." They echoed around me, seducing my mind with promises of peace and shelter, inviting me to surrender to their embrace. "No!" I gasped, shaking my head violently to break free of the lure. I felt the girl's hand tighten around mine, her fear radiating from her like electricity. "Don't listen to them," I said firmly, forcing each word through clenched teeth. As I approached the crystal, I realized it wasn't merely a beacon. It was a barrier, a ward against what lurked beyond. When I reached out to touch its cool surface, a wave of warmth washed over me, momentarily soothing the ache in my chest. Then a low thrum pulsed through the air, shaking the ground beneath our feet, a signal that reverberated through my bones. Suddenly, the chilling wails grew louder, intertwining with the whispers and rising into a fevered pitch as the shadows surged forward, clawing their way into the clearing. "Stand close," I shouted, pulling the girl into the protective glow, my heart racing with urgency. The shadows slammed against the light barrier like waves crashing against rocks, fizzing and recoiling as if burned. For a moment, it felt like we had triumphed, but I knew it wasn't over yet. "Join us!" Their mournful cries pierced the air, resonating through the forest, wrapping around us like an unrelenting fog. I refused to look away, staying focused on the crystal, knowing it was our only defense against the ceaseless tide of despair crashing upon us. As the shadows pressed harder, I could feel the ground vibrating with their fury, their anger boiling over into chaos. The girl whimpered, overwhelmed by the intensity of it all. "What do we do next?" she asked frantically. "Stay with me," I shouted, determination sparking anew. "We find a way to break this cycle." As the shadows writhed, I began to see forms emerging within them. Faces twisted in agony, desperate to escape their fate. Their eyes met mine, pleading silently with a mix of sorrow and fury. This wasn't just a battle for our survival. It was a confrontation with the lost, an uncertain reckoning with the pain bound to this forest. "Together," I yelled, filling my lungs with courage. "We can fight. We must not give in." The shadows surged forward, furious screeches echoing around me. But now, fueled by a fiery resolve, I stepped closer to the glowing crystal. I could feel its thrum vibrating through me, a bond forged from the energy that connected us all, light and darkness, hope and despair. I could almost make sense of the ancient language of whispers, weaving a melody in my mind that spoke of unity, of struggling against the tide. The key to breaking the cycle lay there, under the weight of the shadows and the light of the crystal. "Not today," I roared, thrusting my hand against the crystal's surface, channeling every ounce of my determination into that moment. The light surged, blasting outward in a brilliant wave that illuminated the clearing, breaking the binding grip of despair threatening to consume us. I turned to look back at the shadows, power surging through me as the crystal's light shimmered around us, igniting a spark of hope. The shadows recoiled, their forms trembling before the radiant glow, losing their grip on the world that had held them captive for so long. A roar of anguish erupted as the wailing figures began to dissipate, fading into the light, shrieks trailing off into weakened whispers. "We will return. You will know us," they cried as they shrank back into nothingness, shadows fleeing before the brilliance of the mystical radiance. But just as victory seemed within our grasp, the ground beneath us pulsed violently, a last desperate attempt by the forsaken souls to reclaim their hold. The crystal flickered, dimming at the edges, the shadows rallying one final time, charging forward in a whirlwind of darkness. Breathing heavily, I forced myself to focus, channeling all that I could into the last flicker of the crystal, digging deep into the wells of my spirit, determined to break free once and for all. "Stay close," I shouted, gripping the girl's hand tightly again as a barrier of light enveloped us, just as darkness surged around us. The crystal flared one last time, illuminating the clearing in a spectacular explosion of brightness. In that blinding flash, I felt the very fabric of the forest shift, the air trembling with an energy that shook to its core. The shadows dissolved, howling to the winds as the light surged forward, swallowing them whole, lighting the path ahead, revealing a way beyond. "All together," I cried, squeezing the girl's hand one last time. And with that, we dashed into the heart of the brilliant glow, leaping toward the light and the promise of freedom that lay ahead. As I lunged into the radiant light, a wave of warmth washed over me, pulling me into a different realm. The intensity of the glow enveloped my entire being, wrapping around me like a nurturing embrace, yet a chilling unease lingered in the back of my mind. I could sense a shift, as if reality itself shuddered under the weight of what lay beyond. Euphoria quickly faded as visions danced before my eyes. I found myself in a surreal landscape, almost dreamlike, but tainted by something sinister. The once vibrant colors were dulled, shadows stretching across the ground like fingers trying to claw their way back into existence. "Where are we?" the girl whispered, her voice trembling as she clung tightly to my arm, eyes darting around in panic. "I don't know," I replied, scanning the horizon for something familiar. "But it can't be worse than where we just were." There was a hushed kind of silence here, a stillness that felt heavy with expectation. The air hung thick, almost suffocating, carrying with it the faintest echo of distant cries that prickled at the edges of my senses. A thin mist materialized, curling around our ankles, swirling like lost souls searching for a way home. Suddenly, the ground trembled again, sending a ripple that shook through my bones. I steadied myself, glancing at the girl. Her face was pale, eyes wide with trepidation, but behind her fear was something else, something defiant. I reminded myself that we could confront whatever lingered in this place, that together we could face the shadows that sought to reclaim us. Then, out of the fog, emerged a group of figures, hunched and shrouded in tattered cloaks that fluttered even though there was no breeze. Their faces remained hidden, but I could feel their eyes watching us, studying us, their intentions veiled in mystery. "We do not belong here," I murmured, instinctively stepping back, pulling the girl with me. "We need to keep moving." "Wait," she whispered, her voice soft and hesitant. I glanced back, realizing she was rooted in place, transfixed by the ominous figures. The entities shifted, whispering among themselves. I couldn't make out the words, but they sounded like a chant, a spell woven together under the weight of ancient sorrow. With a deep breath, I took a step forward, breaking the paralysis chaining her. "We have to go?" I implored, as the dread began to crawl under my skin. As if my words triggered some response, the figures turned toward us in unison, their cloaks billowing, revealing shadowy limbs that seemed to sway in a rhythm of their own. "You trespass on sacred ground," one of them hissed, its voice raspy yet melodic, sending shivers coursing down my spine. "I'm not afraid of you," I shouted, though my heart raced wildly. I could feel the girl's grip tighten on my arm, and I took a step back, instinctively shielding her. The figures advanced, gliding across the misty ground, their movements unnatural, almost floating. The depth of their presence seemed to weave a web of anxiety, a tangible tension that threatened to suffocate us. "You seek the light, yet you linger in shadows," another figure snarled. "You cannot escape what you have already embraced." "What do you mean?" I demanded, desperation creeping into my voice. "We don't want any part of this." The first figure raised a finger, a gesture so swift that it almost felt like a strike. "Your fear nourishes us," it breathed. "You are connected to what you run from. You cannot sever the bond." Horrified, I felt an icy grip wrap around my heart, squeezing tight. The shadows in my mind began to shudder, chaotic memories surfacing unbidden, each one wrapped in regret, draped in sorrow. Faces of past friends flitted through my thoughts, moments lost in time, dragging up emotions buried beneath the surface. "Come with us," the cloaked figures beckoned, voices mingling into a haunting melody. "Join the chorus of longing. You will never be alone again." My breath hitched. I could feel the girl trembling beside me, her fear igniting my own. This was no mere threat. It was a promise. The lure of belonging, of escaping the pain, hung heavy in the air, enticing and dangerously intoxicating. "No!" I gasped, shaking my head vehemently as the shadows around us grew darker, pressing in like a whirlwind. "We won't give in." With each word I fought back. The whispers surged louder, echoing deeper, worming their way into my resolve. "Resist us, and you will lose everything you hold dear," a voice deep and foreboding warned. A collective gasp, almost a sigh, resonated from the cloaked figures as they closed the distance. "You still have the choice," they urged, "to leave the pain behind, to find solace." Their hands reached out, slim fingers stretching toward us, shimmering with a faint light that only masked the darkness lurking beneath. My heart raced as instinct kicked in, and I grabbed the girl's hand, pulling her close. "We can't stay here. Don't listen to them." In that moment, desperation surged through me, igniting a spark of defiance. Fueled by fear and determination, I turned away from the figures, dragging her with me toward the faint glimmer, a thread of light that pierced through the oppressive gloom. As we retraced our steps, the murmur of the figures turned into a furious roar, demanding our return, unleashing a torrent of swirling shadows that sought to envelop us. "You cannot escape your fate," they cried, their voices mingling into a terrifying chorus that echoed around us like thunder. I ran faster, adrenaline propelling me forward, feeling the weight of darkness chasing closely behind. My pulse throbbed in my ears, drowning out their cries. But just when I thought we might slip beyond their reach, a shadow lunged out, wrapping around my ankle, pulling me down. I stumbled, nearly crashing to the ground, but I held on to the girl's hand with unwavering strength. "Don't let go. Keep running," I urged, my voice urgent and wild. She gritted her teeth, her determination shining through her fear, and yanked me back to my feet. Together, we kept moving, battling against the pull of the shadows as they clambered to drag us under, desperate to reclaim what they had lost. The crystal flickered on the distant horizon, pulsating calmly amidst the chaos, a beacon of hope in the darkness. I could feel its energy thrumming, the promise of safety beckoning us to reach it. "Almost there," I shouted, my voice hoarse from exertion. As we pushed through the fog, the darkness writhed, and I glimpsed the cloaked figures regrouping behind us, their anger palpable, growing into a tempest of shadow that swallowed the mist. It felt as if time stretched impossibly like a taut string, ready to snap, each second a fight against the inevitable. In a final burst of effort, we broke free of the mist, crashing into the open ground where the crystal pulsed calmly, illuminating the darkness around it in a soft aura. But even as I ran toward it, the ground quaked beneath us. The figures surged forward, their forms merging into a train of relentless shadows, their wails rising in a cacophony that pierced through my resolve. "Embrace your destiny," they screeched as I reached the base of the crystal, feeling its warmth seep into my skin. "Together," I yelled, grabbing the girl's hand, feeling a surge of strength as we approached the crystal. This was our last stand, our final chance to confront what sought to claim us. With every ounce of willpower, I pressed against the crystal, the intensity of its light wrapping around us, forming a barrier, the final flicker of hope against the encroaching storm of shadows. As the darkness rolled in, I felt it, the shadows clawing at the edge of the light, desperately trying to breach the barrier. I closed my eyes, summoning all my memories, what I wanted to protect, the warmth of love, the echoes of laughter, the light breaking through the suffocating fog. "Let go of our souls," I shouted, summoning the energy of the crystal, channeling my fear into raw defiance, pushing against the shadows encroaching upon us. In that moment, a brilliant light erupted, sweeping out to meet the shadows, a blinding counterstrike that illuminated the clearing and banished the encroaching darkness. I felt the pull lessen, the shadows recoiling from the brilliance, their wails transforming into desperate cries as if they clamored for an escape of their own. "No!" one of the figures cried as they began to dissipate, swirling back toward the depths of the forest, their forms beckoning, faces twisting with both sorrow and rage. "Hold on to me," I yelled, trusting that the light would protect us, that it would cleanse the despair clinging to my heart, freeing us from what had tormented us for far too long. With one final push of energy, I felt the ground beneath us tremble one last time before the bright light enveloped every dark corner, banishing the shadows, bringing a brilliant clarity to the space around us. The echoes faded, the shadows retreated, and I opened my eyes to the breath of fresh air, sunlight pouring in through the trees, the forest transformed. The air tinged with the sweetness of flowers blooming. The heaviness lifted like a long-held breath released into the open sky. Together, we stood in the clearing, bathed in that radiant light, the weight of the shadows finally behind us, a harbinger of hope and new beginnings. But even as I relished in the sun's warmth, I sensed the lingering presence of something deeper within the shadows, a promise that not all darkness could be vanquished so easily. The journey was not over. It was only the beginning. Even as I breathed in the fresh scent of the forest, a cold shiver skittered down my spine. The shadows had retreated, but their presence still clung to the edges of my thoughts, whispering dark secrets that refused to fade. I glanced at the girl beside me, her features softening under the warm light, but I could see the flicker of fear in her eyes. "We made it," I said, trying to convince myself as much as her. But the weight of the darkness, that relentless grip, still lingered like a bad dream refusing to dissipate. Suddenly, I noticed movement at the edge of the clearing. The brush rustled, sending tendrils of unease creeping up my legs. My heartbeat quickened, each thump echoing in my ears like a warning bell. "Did you see that?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. The girl nodded, her face pale as she took a step closer to me. "What was that?" Before I could answer, the shadows coalesced once more, slithering like smoke rising from the ground. They twisted together, forming shapes that were familiar yet horrifying, distorted faces of the figures we had fled. Their mouths opened wide, revealing a darkness that seemed to suck in the very light around them. "Join us." The chorus of whispers resonated through the clearing, echoing off the trees, creating a haunting melody that sent icy fingers creeping down my spine. "Stay with us forever." "No!" I shouted, stepping back as I gripped the girl's hand tighter. "We won't be yours. We're free." But the shadows only seemed to grow bolder, surging toward us, eager to reclaim their hold. I felt a deep chill as they wrapped around the trees, clawing their way back into the light, wanting to consume all that surrounded them. I turned to the girl, desperation welling up in me. "We need to find a way out now." Just then, the ground trembled underfoot, a low growl reverberating through the soil. I looked down in horror as the earth cracked, fissures spreading like veins, dark shadows oozing from the depths. The air grew denser, heavy with the scent of damp earth and decay. "There's something below us," I gasped, glancing at the girl, whose wide eyes mirrored my panic. "We have to move." We sprinted toward the edge of the clearing, the light from the crystal slowly fading behind us. The shadows seemed to follow, undulating like liquid shadows pressing in from all sides. I could hear their voices rising again, a cacophony of despair and sorrow that sliced through the air, shaking the very ground we stood on. "Leave while you can," a gravelly voice echoed from the depths of the crevice, threading through the chorus of whispers. "You do not belong to the light. Your fate is sealed here." I pushed forward, adrenaline coursing through my veins, my feet pounding against the ground as we barreled toward the treeline. Each step grew heavier, as if the shadows wove themselves around our ankles, reluctant to let go. With each passing second, the dense darkness seeped back out, warping reality. Shapes began to form in the gloom, twisted figures that bore the weight of unspoken pain. Their beady eyes glinted in the low light, focusing on us with dark hunger. "Come join us, it's only a step away," they hissed, beckoning me with elongated fingers. "No, we're getting out of here," I screamed, propelling myself forward with sheer determination. I dragged the girl behind me, the urge to flee overtaking my fear. Suddenly, an inky tendril lashed out, snagging at my wrist with a grip so cold it felt like ice. I gasped, trying to shake it off, but it only tightened, pulsing with a dark energy that fed off my terror. The girl shrieked as two more shadowy shapes lunged toward her. "Help!" she cried, her voice cutting through the darkness, igniting my resolve once more. "Let her go!" I roared, my heart aflame with protective fury. I thrashed against the tendril imprisoning me, feeling the coldness crawl up my arm. I had to act fast. There was no time to lose. With a final desperate pull, I tore my wrist away, wincing in pain as the cold released its grip, leaving behind a tingling chill. "Run!" I yelled, and together we plunged deeper into the darkness, weaving through the trees, the whispers growing wild around us. Branches clawed at me, sharp like talons, trying to ensnare us as we ran. The forest groaned around us, an otherworldly symphony of despair and longing echoing in the night. "They're angry," the girl panted, glancing back, fear etched across her face, dark shadows trailing like dark mist on the ground. "I know," I shouted, pushing forward, my determination stealing as fear became a savage fire urging us onward. We burst through the last line of trees into a twisted stretch of land, littered with what appeared to be remnants of an old camp. Polluted memories pervaded the air. Abandoned tents swayed eerily, their fabric tattered and frayed. Broken campfires sat cold and lifeless, remnants of warmth long extinguished, as if speaking of those who had come before us. "Do you think they?" the girl whispered, her voice trembling as she glanced around, dread creeping back into her eyes. "We can't think about that now," I urged, forcing the words out despite the unsettling atmosphere. But even as I spoke, I felt the shadows descending upon us like fog, coiling closer, drawn to the remnants of human presence. "Listen," she exclaimed suddenly, her breath hitching as her eyes went wide. "What's that sound?" I strained to hear, panic settling like a brick in my stomach. Beneath the oppressive quiet was indeed a low murmuring, just audible enough to awaken the chilling dread in my bones. It was a faint cry, distant but growing, echoing with the weight of loss. "Is it them?" I wondered aloud, heart thrumming wildly. The weeping grew louder, taking on a life of its own, weaving through the remnants of the camp, slipping through the moss-covered ground as if pulling memories from every corner. I squinted into the gloom, searching for where it came from, even as the shadows continued to swirl, embracing the camp like a cloak. Suddenly, a figure emerged from the shadows, stepping into the pale light. I froze. Its face was obscured by strands of dark hair, eyes glinting with a mournful glow. "Please," it said with a rasping voice, filled with desperation. Help us end the pain." "No!" I shouted instinctively as the shadows hastened, rising like a tide around the figure. Each heartbeat felt like a countdown, and with every second, the shadows closed in tighter, clawing at visibility and hope. But then I noticed something. Behind the sorrowful visage, there were more figures lurking, flickering in and out like shadows themselves. Each face twisted in sorrow, their mouths moving in rhythmic motion, silent screams trapped in an eternal loop. The girl clutched my arm tighter, and I could feel her tremble against me. "What are they?" she whispered, the fear palpable in her voice. "Souls," I breathed, understanding dawning with a sense of dread that gripped my heart. Trapped between worlds, caught in their own despair. The figure stepped closer, reaching out with thin fingers. "You can't run forever. Join us, and we can end the suffering." Fingers brushing against mine, the shadows writhed behind them, ensuring I felt the weight of the choice before me. The desire to escape warring with the aching sympathy that pulled at my heart. "Join us," the whisper started again, rising up as if emboldened by my hesitation, an unholy communion begging for salvation. "No!" I shrieked, yanking the girl away and stumbling back. I could feel my heart pounding, echoing in my chest like a war drum, fueling my resolve. "We won't give in." At that moment, the maw of darkness widened, clawing at the night, reaching out for anything it could grasp. I turned around, frantically searching for a different route, anything to keep us moving. The remnants of the camp loomed menacingly ahead, the echo of lost souls spiraling in circles, ensnared in an endless cycle of grief. "We have to go," I urged, pulling the girl toward the tree line, her footsteps barely keeping pace with mine. But the shadows surged forward, an undulating wave of desperation, catchy, nining us in its wake. "You cannot escape the truth," they shrieked, the chorus rising higher, clawing at the edges of my sanity, leaving nothing but raw fear in their wake. "Run!" I shouted, dragging the girl's unwilling feet as shadows lunged and grasped, wanting to pull us back into their suffocating embrace. Each step we took felt like running on quicksand, every inch dragging us deeper. Dread sank into my stomach as I realized there was no safe way out. The very air crackled with confusion, uncertainty merging with assaulting fear. If we didn't break free, we'd become yet another hollow whisper, trapped in the crumbling remnants of a forgotten world. We burst into the darkness of the trees, branches snapping against us like angry specters, every rustle behind us a reminder of how close they were. "We're almost there," I screamed, feeling the pulse of the crystal pulling me closer, a lifeline hanging in the balance. But even as we fled, it felt like the forest itself came alive, a living entity refusing to let us pass without paying a price. Shadows slithered around us, mocking our every step, feeding off our fear as the figures continued their haunting wails, echoing promises of despair. The crystal stood like a guiding star in the distance, flickering with radiant light. Every ounce of my will shattered the encroaching darkness, igniting a desire to fight back. "We can do this," I urged, pulling the girl forward with every ounce of strength left in me. But will we make it? The shadows loomed closer, their whispers tightening around our throats. "No!" I gritted my teeth, refusing to surrender. My vision narrowed, heart pounding. We could not give in now. As we broke through the thickest of trees, the clearing opened up before us, glittering bright, inviting, and alive. I felt the warmth of the light wrap around me, a cocoon shielding us from the chaos behind. Yet just as I thought we'd made it, tendrils of darkness exploded from the trees, swift as lightning, latching onto my arm. I stumbled, the impact ripping my feet from the ground, dragging me backward as I fought to break free. "Help me!" I yelled, panic bleeding into my voice. The girl's eyes went wide as she instinctively reached out for me, but shadows curled around her, pulling her down too. "No, no, no!" I screamed, flailing against the enveloping darkness, feeling the weight of despair pressing against my chest. In that moment, I realized the truth. The shadows would not stop until they pulled us back into the abyss where lost souls murmured their demands, until we gave in to the despair they offered. "I won't let you have us," I gasped, rage igniting within me, forcing every ounce of strength into my limbs. I reached for the light, for the crystal, our last chance for freedom. "Stay with me," I urged the girl, my heart pounding, feeling the shadows close in. As the tendrils tightened, I envisioned breaking free, envisioning the light consuming the darkness. "We are more than this," I bellowed, channeling every ounce of defiance into my voice. In a last desperate act, I lunged for the clearing, dragging the girl behind me, my heart aflame with determination. The light snapped at the shadows around us, blindingly bright, shattering the darkness like glass. Suddenly, with an explosion of warmth, I felt the darkness dissolve around us, the shadows retreating, shrieking as they recoiled from the light, their holds severed. It was a moment, a heartbeat of both peace and terror, as the shadows clawed and shrieked in anguish. "You can't escape," they roared in a symphony of despair. But the glow enveloped us, wrapping around our trembling forms like a freeing embrace, and I breathed deeply, feeling the chill invade my chest begin to dissipate. We had overcome this time, yet somewhere in the back of my mind, as I held the girl close, I knew the shadows would always linger, waiting for the next crack of fear to seep through. The journey was far from over, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something darker still awaited us in the depths of the forest. I took a deep breath, trying to calm my racing heart. The light flickered, warm and inviting, wrapping around us like a protective blanket, but I could still feel the remnants of the darkness creeping at the edges of my mind. "What now?" the girl whispered, her voice trembling. The warmth from the crystal surrounded us, yet the chill of fear clung to my skin. "We need to stay close to the light," I replied, scanning the clearing. The woods beyond seemed alive, shadows flitting between trees, ever watchful. A gnawing sensation twisted in my gut, as if something was waiting, lurking just out of sight, ready to pounce. I stepped forward, urging the girl to follow. Let's look for a way out. There has to be a path. With each step, I felt the air grow heavier, thick with unease. The shadows seemed to stretch and writhe, shapes shifting in my peripheral vision. Just as I turned my head to look, they dissolved, leaving only the soft rustle of the wind. "How can this be happening?" she murmured, glancing back at me. "It feels like we're being watched." A chill ran through me as she said the words. "It does, and I don't like it." My instincts screamed at me to move faster. I turned my back toward the dark trees, heading deeper into the light. But with every step, strange sounds filtered through the atmosphere, low whispers threading through the air, unintelligible but heavy with longing. I felt as if they were pulling at me, reaching for memories I didn't want to revisit. "Ignore them," I said firmly, trying to sound brave for both our sakes. Yet, as we continued, a faint sound emerged from the underbrush, a soft giggle that sent a shiver down my spine. "Did you hear that?" I asked, heart pounding as I looked at the girl. "It sounded like children," she replied hesitantly. Another giggle, this one more playful, echoing through the trees, wrapping around us like an icy embrace. I froze, an unsettling feeling gnawing at my insides. This forest was dark enough without whispers of laughter haunting its shadows, reminding me of innocence long lost. "Check it out? Or should we go?" I asked, nervous energy buzzing beneath my skin. "Maybe we should just keep walking," she said, glancing back nervously. But curiosity pulled us both toward the sound. Against all reason, we crept forward, pushing past thorny branches that scratched at our arms, the laughter growing louder with every cautious step. We soon entered a small glade where the light struggled against the thick canopy above. I felt a chill crawl up my spine as I spotted a small patch of wildflowers, vibrant and colorful, blooming in stark contrast to the oppressive gray of the forest. It felt out of place, an oasis or a trap. Then we saw them. Two figures stood at the edge of the flowers, their backs turned to us, small and delicate. They swayed back and forth, giggling incessantly, voices echoing. They wore tattered clothes that swirled around their thin bodies, faces obscured by dark hair. "Hey, are you okay?" I called out, my voice trembling slightly as I took a cautious step forward. Instantly, the laughter stopped. The figures turned slowly to face us, their faces pale, features twisted and devoid of warmth. Eyes just black voids stared back unblinking. "Join us," they sang in unison, their voices resembling cracked porcelain, sending a wave of dread coursing through me. "Play with us forever. We don't want to," I managed, feeling the weight of 1,000 shadows pressing against my mind. Suddenly, they lunged forward with a speed that belied their frail forms. I felt a sharp tug on my arm, cold fingers gripping me with an iron-like hold. The girl screamed, instinctively pulling back, but it was too late. The figures cackled, dragging us toward the flowers that felt much too alive, pulsing like a heart beneath our feet. "No! Let go!" I yelled, panic surging as I fought against their grip. The shadows began to swirl around us, a dark tempest of sorrow that wrapped tighter, suffocating our bravery. In a desperate rage, I shoved back against the figures, breaking free with a burst of energy. The girl and I stumbled backward, breathless, desperate to escape. But the laughter turned into a shriek, reverberating through the trees, filled with rage. "Fleeing will not help you," one of the figures hissed, their voice sharp like glass. I reached for the girl's hand, heart hammering in fear. "We need to go now." We turned and ran, the chilling laughter still echoing behind us, trailing through the trees like a nightmare refusing to fade. The whispers intensified, growing louder, drowning out our footsteps. Pushing past the branches, I could feel the darkness closing in again, shadows darting just out of reach, clawing for us. "Over there!" I shouted, spotting a narrow path weaving through the underbrush. It might lead us out. As we collided into the narrow opening, it felt like stepping into another world. The air shifted, and the shadows slinked back, but the whispering cries haunted us. I could feel the weight of unseen eyes upon us, watching our every move. The path twisted and turned, leading deeper into the dark heart of the forest. The light from the crystal slowly dimmed behind us, but ahead, I could see another flash, a flicker of brightness that drew me in like a moth to a flame. "Do you see that?" I asked, pointing as we raced forward. "I hope it's safe," the girl replied, her voice laced with fear and uncertainty. We pressed on, urgency pushing us faster. But the shadows fought back, swirling around our feet like mist, trying to pull us down, to drag us back into despair. I squeezed the girl's hand tighter, willing us to keep moving. Just when I thought we'd gained distance, the path suddenly opened into a clearing, and in its center stood a gnarled tree, ancient and twisted, its bark blackened as if charred by a fire long ago. Strange symbols were etched into its surface, glowing faintly. But there was something at the base of the tree, an altar covered in dark, damp earth, surrounded by wilted flowers. And there were eyes, countless eyes peering from within the bark, watching us, hungry and alive. "They are here," a whisper slithered through the air, wrapping around me like a cold shroud. "They've been waiting." I felt a wave of dread wash over me. The shadows thickened, drifting closer as if drawn to our presence. The air crackled with tension, and the whispers grew louder, rising into an unbearable cacophony that disoriented me. "Run! We can't stay here!" I shouted, turning away from the tree, but the whispers somehow grabbed me, tethering me to the spot. "I need to break free." As we dashed back the way we came, the laughter returned, echoing all around us, this time more malicious, digging into the very corners of my mind. The path twisted, becoming a maze of terrifying shadows closing in from every direction. Suddenly, we stumbled upon another figure, a shrouded person, dark and cloaked, standing at the intersection. Its face was hidden, but an eerie light emanated from within the folds of its garments, illuminating the space around it with an unhealthy glow. "Lost souls wander here," it spoke softly, voice like silk over gravel. "Will you offer your light for a small price?" I felt my blood run cold, the tendrils of its voice creeping into my thoughts, pressing against my vulnerabilities. "No!" I shouted, adrenaline surging again. I pulled the girl close, turning to flee, but the shadows began to surge again, enveloping us in a suffocating embrace. The laughter rose to a fever pitch, punctuating the oppressive darkness, mocking our every movement. "We can't let them win!" I yelled, feeling the weight of despair crowding in. As we broke free from the path, I imagined the light wrapping around us, defending against those eager, hungry faces yearning for our surrender. "Focus on the crystal," I urged, hope flooding my voice. "We just need to reach it." But through the thickening shadows, the laughter rang in our ears, intertwining with the whispers that sought to unearth our fears. I could feel our sanctuary slipping away, just like the warmth of the sun, threatening to drown us in grief and longing. And in that terrifying moment, I realized it was not just the forest that wanted us. It was the darkness woven into it, an ancient force hungry to claim every flicker of light. Just ahead, I could see the clearing where the crystal had stood, visuals mixing with memory and fear, but the shadows were closing in rapidly, clawing at my edges. "Stay close," I yelled, fear erupting like a wildfire within me. The darkness surged, stretching out like a tidal wave, but I had to keep moving. Our lungs burned, our legs felt like lead, but we pressed on with every ounce of strength we had left. "Almost there." The cry spilled from my lips again, desperate and raw. But just as we reached the edge of the clearing, the shadows erupted, rising high above, filling the night with deafening shrieks that shattered the crisp air. I felt myself being pulled backward, caught in the net of darkness as it wrapped around us, a crushing weight pinning me to the ground. "No! No!" I fought, thrashing against their hold, but the more I struggled, the tighter they clung. The girl was screaming, and the darkness twisted around her, insidious fingers dragging her down into the abyss. I could see the fear in her eyes, her light fading, and it ignited something inside me. In a desperate moment, I closed my eyes and thought of the warmth, the brilliance of the crystal, willing it to break through the overwhelming darkness. "We're not done yet," I shouted defiantly. In the depths of my heart, I felt a spark, a tiny flame igniting. I reached within, searching for that glimmer of strength, and unleashed it, crying out against the night, battling the shadows that sought to drown us. "Get away from her!" I roared, channeling all my fear and anger into a blinding light that surged up around me, erupting like a star. The shadows shrieked, recoiling as the light broke through, casting away the darkness and revealing the true freedom that had always existed within us. The realization hit me. The darkness thrived on our fear, our despair, and it was our light, our hope, that could drive it all away. With a final push, I felt the chains of darkness shatter, and my vision cleared as I reached for the girl, pulling her to me. "We can escape," I shouted, confidence filling my voice. "Let's run." Together, we dashed into the light, leaving the shadows behind us, determined to break free from this nightmare once and for all. But would the darkness truly let us go? Did it not cling to us like a forgotten lament, a promise unbroken? I had to believe the crystal held the key. It had to be our salvation. Leaving the shadows in our wake, we raced toward the pulsing light, unaware of the darker forces that still loomed. The journey was far from over, and I could almost sense it. The shadows were regrouping, gathering to strike again. But with each step toward the light, I felt my resolve strengthen. We would fight. We would conquer what haunted us, and maybe, just maybe, we could find a safe place to rest. The crystal gleamed brighter as we ran faster, and I could almost taste victory on my tongue, tantalizingly close, a chance to reclaim our freedom from the grip of the darkness. Yet I knew deep down, the shadows would never truly disappear. They would always be lurking, biding their time, waiting for the perfect moment to strike again. But with the brilliance of the crystal illuminating our path, I clung to the hope that this time we would overcome. As we surged forward, the light enveloped us, and I took one last glance toward the retreating darkness, quietly vowing that it would not claim us again. Little did I know, the darkest battles were yet to come. As we rushed toward the pulsing light, a strange sensation began to creep up my spine. The brightness ahead felt warm and promising, yet something deeper in the woods twisted my gut, whispering that we weren't safe yet. I glanced back one last time, half expecting to see shadows pooling around us, but the darkness was holding back mere outlines against the trees. "Are we really going to make it?" the girl asked, her voice shaky as she tried to keep pace. I turned to her, forcing a confident smile. "We will. Just keep moving." But doubt clung to my thoughts like a fog, heavy and suffocating. I couldn't shake off the feeling of being hunted, as if those shadows were just waiting to spring back into action, ready to reclaim what they had lost. The path grew brighter as we pushed forward, and soon I could see it, a stone altar bathed in brilliant light radiating from the crystal. It stood majestically, untouched by the chaos that surrounded us. My heart soared. We were almost there. Suddenly, a violent gust of wind howled through the clearing, whipping leaves and debris around us like a furious storm. It felt alive, as if the forest itself was protesting our escape. I shielded my eyes, bewildered and terrified. "Look out!" the girl yelled, pointing behind me. I turned just in time to see a shadow darting between the trees, a mass of blackness that seemed to almost pulsate with a life of its own. A chilling laugh echoed in the air, sharp and mocking, echoing the laughter of those dark figures we had encountered earlier. I felt a cold sweat break out across my skin. "Run!" I shouted, grabbing her hand once more and sprinting for the altar. The shadows lashed at our heels, a swirling mass intent on dragging us back. They were relentless, their laughter rising into a frenzied cacophony, drowning out the sound of our pounding hearts. "Faster!" I urged, overcoming the fear, throttling my chest, drawing strength from the shimmering light ahead. We leaped forward, every step feeling heavier as the pull of darkness wrapped around us. Just when I thought we were within reach, a shadow lunged out, grasping my ankle with icy fingers, trying to trip me. It nearly worked. I stumbled, but quickly regained my footing, practically dragging the girl with me. The light! We have to reach the light! With renewed desperation, I charged ahead. It felt like fighting through water, thick, heavy, and suffocating. As we neared the altar, a surge of energy filled the air, and I could almost hear the crystal calling out to us, urging us to break free. Almost there! Just a few more steps! I yelled, confidence surging within me amidst the chaos. But just then, the very ground beneath us trembled as if the forest itself was waking up in anger. With a horrifying crack, a massive branch broke from the nearby trees, falling toward us like a guillotine. "Watch out!" I cried, but it was too late. The branch crashed to the ground, an explosion of dirt and debris that sent us sprawling. I landed hard on the ground, pain shooting through my side. The girl fell beside me, gasping. We scrambled to our feet, fear flooding my mind, and I glanced back to where the shadows were gathering again, thicker and darker than ever. "Get up! We have to go!" She nodded, panic in her eyes, and we hustled toward the altar, our limbs trembling from the struggle. The shadows writhed, angry figures swaying violently, as if they were attached to strings pulled by unseen hands. Too late, an echoing voice whispered from the shadows, sibilant and cold. I froze, chills racing down my spine. "You cannot escape." I knew, deep down, that this was the same voice I'd heard before, weaving through the woods like a snake. Every fiber of my being screamed to run, but my feet felt glued to the ground, paralyzed by fear. "Don't listen. Keep moving," I shouted both to the girl and to myself, forcing my feet to respond. With every ounce of willpower, I sprinted toward the altar, breathless and terrified. The crystal glimmered, vibrant and bright, casting a warm spell that battled against the creeping darkness behind us. As we reached the stone altar, I could feel a palpable change in the air. Intense, electric, pregnant with potential. I could sense the shadows wailing, shifting uneasily as if they were repelled by the light. We pressed our palms against the smooth, cool surface of the altar, hoping it would offer sanctuary. "It can't end like this," I yelled at the looming shadows. "We won't let you take us." The shadows drew closer, a swirling mass of despair. "Your light is no match for us," they hissed, echoing around us, an inky blackness that threatened to drown out our voices. But as the shadows pressed in, I felt something shift inside me. Maybe it was the strength of the light. Maybe it was the simple human instinct to survive, but I swore I could tap into it. "Fight back!" I bellowed, feeling a rush of energy surge from deep within. "We are stronger than this." I focused on the crystal, visualizing the light expanding outward, pushing the darkness back. The warmth enveloped us, giving strength to our trembling bodies. With a primal scream, I pushed against the altar, pouring every bitter memory and shred of hope into it, forcing the fear into the light as if it was a living creature. "Leave us alone!" The response was immediate. The shadows writhed and twisted, their laughter turning into shrieks of agony. They recoiled from the light, the darkness swirling and crashing around us like a storm battered by a powerful wind. In that moment, the forest seemed to come alive, resonating with our fight. The air ignited with energy, the tree branches trembling, the leaves rustling with a feral intensity as if they, too, were joining our struggle. I tightened my grip on the girl's hand and turned my gaze back toward the altar. "Together!" I shouted, feeling the bond between us strengthening. We closed our eyes, focusing solely on the warmth of the crystal. The trembling shadows surged forward again, but we stood our ground, determined to unleash that hopeful light. In an explosion of brilliance, I felt the wave of energy break free from the altar, flooding the clearing with light that shimmered like stars in a night sky. The darkness shrieked, piercing my ears, the air thickening with their frantic cries. I could hear the sinister whispers fading, gradually silenced by the overwhelming brightness. But just as I thought we were winning, a massive shadow loomed taller than anything I had seen, a figure taking shape from the darkness itself. It rose to its full height, towering above the altar, a grotesque parody of a person, covered in swirling shadows that pulsated like a living organism. "Fools!" it bellowed, a sound that reverberated through the ground and rattled my bones. "You think you can escape my realm?" I felt a deep panic clawing at my insides as I stared into the abyssal eyes of this monstrous creature. Its gaze pierced through the light, pulling at the very essence of my courage. "We have to go!" I cried, fear flooding my senses. But the girl was mesmerized, staring into the void where the creature's hollow eyes held her captive. "No, we can't," she breathed, as if entranced, the light dimming in her presence. "Look away!" I shouted. "Don't let it take you." With every ounce of strength, I pulled her back, desperately clinging to her. Time slowed as the shadows wrapped around the monster, and the air grew thick with dread. "Leave her alone!" I bellowed, almost losing hope as the massive figure leaned closer, its features blurring into the darkness around it. Just then, the crystal glowed brighter, whispering sweet promises of safety, of light tearing through the dark. I could feel the vitality within pushing against the looming threat. "Together!" I yelled once more. "We can do this!" Adrenaline coursed through me, igniting my resolve. And when the figure lunged, I met its advance with every ounce of determination left. In that split second, I felt the power of the light surge from the altar, shattering the darkness around us. It burst forth like a sun breaking free from the horizon, engulfing the towering figure. But I knew deep down that this was only the beginning. Darkness never truly disappeared. It lingered in the corners of the mind, waiting for the first crack of fear to seep through. I steadied myself, gripping tightly to the girl's hand as we braced for the next wave of shadows, ready to fight. No matter what lay ahead, one truth was clear. I wouldn't let the darkness claim us. With the brightness guiding our way, I knew we had to persist. We were not done fighting, and somewhere deep inside, I felt the shadows still lurking, waiting for their moment to reclaim us. But in that moment, we had light on our side, and it was more powerful than any fear. Little did I know, the darkest trials were still ahead, and they would test not just our resolve, but everything we had ever believed. As the light from the crystal surged, it pushed back against the monstrous figure, but I could see the shadows fighting back harder. The air thickened, charged with tension, almost alive with fear and dread. I could feel a cold sweat trickling down the back of my neck as I braced myself for what was coming next. "Stay with me," I told the girl, my voice trembling. I had to keep her safe. I had to be strong. The monster howled as the light clashed against the darkness surrounding it. For a moment, it shimmered in the dazzling glow, but then it began to grow even larger, absorbing the shadows behind it. The very edges of reality felt like they were folding in on themselves, as if the forest itself was bending to its will. I could see its features begin to sharpen, eyes glowing an unnatural red, a gaping maw filled with jagged teeth. "You are weak," it taunted, its voice a low rumble that vibrated through the ground. "You think this light can protect you? I am the darkness. I am everywhere." I shivered, the weight of its words pressing down like a heavy fog. Panic began to creep in as the shadows tightened around me, snaking like 1,000 glimmering serpents eager to strike. "Don't listen to it," I yelled, trying to rally my courage in the girl's. I clutched her hand tighter. "We need to reach the altar." But as we pushed ahead, I could feel the shadows coiling around us, desperate to pull us down. The air turned heavy, thick with despair, almost suffocating. Every step felt like wading through molasses, each moment stretching into eternity. The laughter began again, echoing around us in a chorus of dark amusement. It was a sickening sound, rich with malice, twisting my stomach into knots. Faster, faster. You cannot escape. I took a deep breath, fighting back the rising tide of fear that threatened to drown me. I couldn't let them see me falter. "We're not afraid of you," I shouted, even though my voice wavered. I pushed onward, focusing on the light, grasping for the warmth it promised. Suddenly, the ground beneath our feet began to tremble, and a low growl resonated through the forest. The shadows underfoot started to throb as if alive. I could hear the whispers sharpening into a frenzy, a cacophony of voices clawing at my sanity. Join us, they chanted, a haunting melody that lured and beckoned. "Don't listen," I yelled, trying to drown out the whispering with my own voice. "Keep your eyes on the altar." But the darkness was thickening. Tendrils lashed out suddenly, breaking the ground apart, forming fissures that opened wide like gaping mouths hungry to swallow us. I barely managed to leap clear of the nearest one, grabbing the girl and pulling her with me. I felt her other hand slipping from my grip, and I twisted to see her, eyes wide with terror, as she fought against the pull of shadows that swept around her feet. "I can't breathe," she gasped, panic bubbling within her. "Hold on," I yelled, pulling her back with everything I had. The shadows curled tighter around her legs, their icy grip wrapping like chains, locking her in place. A determined shout escaped my lips. "You won't take her." With a surge of ferocity, I grasped at the air and reached for the glowing crystal, picturing the warmth enveloping us, transforming our fear into strength. But the monster loomed closer, feeding off our desperation. "You are nothing," it growled, the shadows wrapping around its form, lending it an even more terrible presence that sent chills into my core. My heart pounded in my chest like a frantic drum, and I could feel urgency curling around me, squeezing my breath. "You will not win," I gritted out, determined. With all my might, I shoved against the darkness, pouring every ounce of willpower into my defiance. Suddenly, the crystal blazed brilliantly again, an explosion of light that shot through the night like a beacon. The shadows flinched, recoiling from its brightness, but the monster howled, a sound that shook the ground underfoot, making my body tremble. The laughter morphed into anguished screams, the voices losing their amusement, turning into a wild cacophony of rage and fear. I could see the darker figure flinching, its own shadows splitting apart, trembling in the light. "Now!" I shouted, and we dashed toward the altar, that warmth pulling us closer like a lifeline. But just as we reached out for the light, the ground beneath again rumbled ominously. A chasm erupted, swallowing the earth beneath the altar, and we stumbled, teetering on the edge of darkness. From the depths, shadowy hands clawed upward, grasping and reaching, tugging at our ankles, wanting to drag us down into the abyss. I felt panic surge through my veins as one of those hands latched onto my foot. "Help!" I cried, struggling to shake it off while the girl clutched my arm, fear etching her features as she looked back at the chaos behind us. For a split second, I felt the weight of hopelessness crushing me. But then I remembered the light, the hope, hidden within us. "Fight, fight, fight!" I screamed, willing it to overtake my fear. Pulling with everything I had, I surged against the darkness, twisting away from the malicious grip. It roared in frustration, its form bucking against the sheer force of the light. I turned back to the girl, meeting her terrified gaze, and shouted, "Don't give in!" With that, I gathered my courage, pushing my own fear away and drawing strength from the warmth of the crystal. A fierce light exploded from it then, blasting a radiant wave through the darkness. The shadows howled, losing their grip, the rank cold scurrying away, turning into mist. We didn't stop moving, the brightness urging us forward, narrowing in on victory. But as we leaped forward, all doubt faded into determination. However, the shadows twitched ominously, regrouping just outside the beacon we'd created. They writhed like a snake, hissing threats and baneful promises. "You can't seal me away," the dark figure rumbled again, and the realization hit me. The light might not be enough to keep it at bay. The air grew colder, the fear embedding itself deep in my bones. I could almost see the creature smirk beneath the shadows, a grotesque figure delighting in our struggle. Together, I urged the girl, our hearts racing in unison. With a synchronized breath, we closed our eyes, drawing strength from each other. We would not yield. A moment stretched into eternity. Just then, the crystal pulsed again, brighter than before, filling us with warmth. We opened our eyes, locked in that empowering glow, a fire igniting deep within, pushing the shadows back, banishing them from our minds. But whispers began again, creeping into my thoughts, searching for cracks in my resolve. "You cannot escape," they echoed, a haunting sound weaving through the air. "The darkness is eternal. It will follow." Yet I stood tall against the looming doubt, clutching the girl's hand as if it was my lifeline. No matter what it took, I wouldn't let them take her. "We will stand against you," I shouted, my voice rising above the whispers, the taunts, the darkness itself. Unyielding, I thrust my palm against the crystal, feeling the surge of energy ripple through me, pushing back against everything that sought to consume us. I wouldn't let fear dictate our fate. As the waves of warmth enveloped us, I could see the shadows curving and thrashing against the light. But deep in the darkened forest, I sensed they were lurking still, biding their time. In that crucial moment, I realized this fight was just beginning, and as the shadows stretched back, gathering themselves like a storm on the horizon, I felt that knot of dread tightening again. We had yet to face the darkest of what lay ahead. As the shadows receded, I felt a fleeting sense of relief wash over me, but it didn't last long. A creeping dread settled back into my bones as I glanced around. The forest around us was eerily quiet, the air thick with tension. I could almost hear the heartbeat of the night, thrumming ominously, pulling me into an unsettling calm before the storm. "Do you feel that?" I whispered to the girl, my heart racing. She nodded, her eyes darting to the trees, their branches twisted like gnarled fingers reaching out to grasp us. "It's like something is watching," she replied, her voice quivering. I turned slowly, feeling the weight of invisible eyes upon us. It was as if the forest had come alive, the shadows replaying their dark dance in hidden corners. I strained to listen, every nerve in my body alert, waiting for the next move of whatever lay in the darkness. Suddenly, from the depths of the trees, a low groan echoed, reverberating through the ground like a distant thunder. It wasn't natural. It was filled with pain and loneliness, a chilling reminder of what lurked in the depths. I tensed, sensing the darkness coiling behind us, ready to pounce on any sign of weakness. "Let's keep moving," I urged, trying to pull her away from the suffocating stillness of the woods. But as I took my first step forward, the underbrush rustled violently, and shadows slithered toward us with unnerving speed, clawing at the air. "Run!" I yelled, and we bolted into the night, adrenaline kicking in as the forest swallowed our frantic footsteps. The darkness surged forward, hungry and relentless, the laughter of the shadows chasing us like a sinister echo that reverberated in my skull. Branches snagged at my clothes, claws of night reaching out, but I paid no attention. My only focus was the glowing crystal in my pocket, a constant reminder of our fight. I could feel its warmth pulsing with a rhythm that matched the dreadful beat of my heart. Just when I thought we were gaining distance, the very ground beneath us groaned again, and a gash opened up in the earth, spewing forth a thick fog that curled around our ankles, pulling us down. I yanked the girl to the side, barely avoiding the treacherous pit. My breath caught in my throat. "What's happening?" I cried, scanning the haze rolling in from the chasm. The air became dense with whispers, weaving a chilling narrative that seeped into my mind. Join us," they echoed, a terrible comfort that made every hair stand on end. I squeezed my eyes shut, pushing against the darkness, creeping forward. "No, we aren't yours," I shouted defiantly at the fog, my words seeming to dissolve into the air, lost amidst the shadows. But the whispers only grew louder, swirling around us like a storm. You cannot resist. We are the night. You will fall just like them. Images flash through my mind, faces of lost souls, their vacant eyes staring back at me in despair, woven into the fog like ghosts trapped in the very fabric of darkness. It sent sickening chills down my spine as I realized that those whispers weren't just from the present. They were echoes of every lost traveler who had dared enter this cursed forest. I stumbled to a halt, fear wrapping around me like a vice. Focus, I chanted to myself, looking back at the girl, who was caught in the swirling fog, her expression a mixture of horror and confusion. Hold my hand, I cried, reaching out to her. She grasped my fingers, the warmth of her grip a lifeline that guided me through the darkness, threatening to engulf us. With one last push, I summoned every ounce of courage and ran forward, dragging her with me. The brightness of the altar had begun to dim in the oppressive fog, but I still felt the crystal in my pocket, pulsing softly, reminding me of the strength we still had. Taking a deep breath, I closed my eyes for a moment and concentrated. I imagined the light bursting forth, illuminating the dark, banishing the whispers, sending the fog scattering like terrified mice. Now! I yelled, and I pressed my palm to the ground, willing the light to shine forth, to push the darkness back just a little longer. As I concentrated, I could feel the warmth radiating outward. The shadows screeched in agony, recoiling from the brilliance. The fog seemed to twist, contorting in unnatural shapes, swirling like angry smoke that sought to obscure all hope. Yet, just as victory seemed possible, a new sound sliced through the air, a deep, echoing rumble, like the growl of a beast awakening. My eyes snapped open, and I froze. The dark figure had returned, no longer hidden among the shadows, but manifesting fully, towering over us. Fools! It roared, its voice shaking the very ground. You think you can defeat me with mere light? Panic surged in my chest. I felt the shadows wrapping tighter around us, drawing from the fear that threatened to unravel my mind. I could see the glow of the crystal flickering, struggling against the ominous force that loomed behind me. Fight it! Don't give in! I urged the girl, my heart pounding as I faced the behemoth shadow. It lunged forward, darkness erupting in a wave, and I gritted my teeth, extending my palm toward it. You won't take us! I screamed, feeling the light surge within me, desperate to push back against the bleakness that threatened to wrap us in its embrace. But the shadows were relentless. They crashed against the wall of light I created, crashing like waves against a rocky shore, splintering and swirling with chaos. The whispers grew into a wailing scream, a tempest of voices that clawed at my sanity. I closed my eyes, feeling the destructive force pressing closer, intending to drown us in despair. I had to fight through it, to find the spark of hope in the darkness. We are not afraid, I shouted, my voice trembling but resolute. And then, in that moment of darkness swirling all around, I felt a warmth touch my heart, a burst of energy that seemed to ignite a flame within me. My eyes opened wide again as a blinding light overwhelmed the darkness in front of me, illuminating the scene. The monster reeled back, howling in rage and fear as the shadows dissipated around it like smoke in the wind. I could see its grotesque form twisting, flailing against the brilliance as I gathered my strength. Using that light unleashed from deep within, I poured my willpower into it, fueling the surge of brightness that pushed back against the creature, forcing it further and further away. Leave us alone, I yelled, channeling every ounce of determination. I felt the tumult around me pulse with energy, creating a chasm between us and the monster pushing against the light. But in the chaos, I could sense that even though we pushed it back, it was not gone. The creature seemed to sense that too, lurking just beyond the perimeter of the glowing barrier, waiting. You cannot hide, it taunted, its voice a menacing hiss that sent shivers crawling down my spine. You are tethered to this place. You can never escape. With those words lingering in the air, the shadows began to swirl more violently, feeding on the fear creeping back into my heart. I clutched the girl's hand tighter and whispered, "We have to go. We have to leave now." The shadows twisted dangerously close again, their claws the very essence of despair, and I could feel the temperature drop, an icy breath against my skin. It was an undeniable reminder that darkness was always lurking, always biding its time. Ready or not, I knew we had to take that leap into the unknown, forcing ourselves to trust in the light we wielded. With determination, we turned, breaking free from the grip of fear and chaos. "Move!" I roared, and together we sprinted into the depths of the forest, vowing to escape the suffocating grasp of the darkness. The battle might not be over, but we would stand side by side against whatever haunted this place, refusing to let it consume us. One step at a time, we would carve our path through the shadows. With the light guiding our steps, we plunged deeper into the inky blackness, knowing our fate was still very much uncertain. As we sprinted through the thick underbrush, my heart raced, echoing loudly in my chest. The night air, cool against my skin, felt charged with a panic I couldn't shake. I glanced back, half expecting to see the creature lunging after us. Instead, I found the forest was eerily still, the kind of silence that settles just before a storm. It sent chills racing down my spine, like fingers tracing my back. I could feel the darkness watching us, poised to strike the moment we let our guards down. "Keep moving," I urging myself to push past the dread creeping into my mind. The trees towered above us, their gnarled branches twisting like skeletal hands reaching, grasping, as if they were willing to reclaim us. Every shadow seemed to flicker with a life of its own, teasing me with ominous hints of what lurked just out of sight. The ground felt uneven beneath our feet, roots snaking out like twisted emerald veins, threatening to trip us with every hurried step. I could feel the girl's breath quickening beside me, matching the frantic rhythm of my own. Suddenly, as we pushed deeper into the woods, I found myself halted by an overwhelming wave of darkness. The air felt charged, tense, making it hard to breathe. I looked up, and there it was, a thick fog creeping in, swirling like a living entity, tightening its grip around us. Panic surged as the mist coalesced, blocking out the path ahead. It hugged the ground, curling around my legs, and making each step feel like wading through treacle. I strained to see through the darkening haze, but nothing was visible, just white chaos swirling to engulf us. "Stay close," I yelled, pulling the girl to me. The shadows seemed alive within the fog, whispering our fears back to us, weaving tales of the hopeless souls who wandered here before us. "You will stumble. You cannot escape." Each voice was laced with a dreadful mockery, twisting and turning like serpents in the night. I could feel every whisper creeping into my head, sowing seeds of doubt and despair. It was as if the very forest was trying to brainwash us, filling our minds with false visions of surrender. "Don't listen," I shouted, clenching my teeth and my fist. "We are stronger than this." But even as I said the words, I felt uncertain. How could we possibly conquer the darkness that seemed to pulse around us? Just when I thought the shadows would completely envelop us, I felt the ground tremble again, a low rumble growing beneath us. The trees around us began to shake, their branches rattling like broken bones, and suddenly a piercing wail cut through the chilling silence. It sounded like a lost soul in agony, wretched and desperate, echoing throughout the trees. We stumbled back a step, shock rippling through me. It sounded close but somehow distant, an unsettling mix that made my skin prickle. My heart raced, and I felt a new wave of fear stampede through me. "What was that?" I barely whispered. "I don't know," she replied, eyes wide with fright. "What do we do?" "Stay quiet," I urged, pressing a finger over my lips. I strained to listen, every muscle tense. The echoes of that haunting wail faded, replaced by the sound of something dragging across the ground. I glanced around us, the intensity of the fog swallowing our surroundings more and more. The dim slivers of moonlight that had pierced through now seemed suffocated, turning the world into a pit of foreboding dread. Then I saw it. A figure emerging from the mist, slumped and dragging itself slowly forward. My breath caught in my throat as I strained to see, fear curling in my stomach. The shape shifted and twisted, a haunting shadow fading in and out of view. It was small, but the way it moved was unnatural, limbs contorting in ways that didn't feel right. The figure let out a soft but chilling whimper, and I recoiled instinctively. Is that someone?" I whispered, terror clawing at my throat. "I don't know," she breathed back, voice trembling like a fragile leaf. Before I could respond, the form surged forward, lunging from the depths of the haze, and I quickly realized it wasn't human. The features were twisted, grotesque, a nightmarish blend of shadow and shape, shifting as it darted closer, the eyes glowing faintly, a sickly yellow, filled with something dark and hungry. "Run!" I shouted again, adrenaline shooting through me as the hungry specter lunged toward us. We sprinted backward, scrambling to escape the clutches of whatever that creature was. My heart raced as I glanced behind, urgently focusing on the path ahead, feeling the pressure of the darkness closing in around us. But the figure was gaining. The tendrils of fog wrapped around its limbs, aiding its pursuit, making it look more monstrous as it dove between the trees effortlessly. I could hear its breath now, ragged and uneven, like the sound of metal scraping against stone. The urge to scream welled up inside me, but I bit my tongue, refusing to give the shadows the satisfaction. "Just a little further," I urged the girl, my voice a hoarse whisper. Where do we go?" she shouted, terror cracking through her tone. "Anywhere but here," I yelled, eyes scanning for any sign of escape. Trees blurred past us. The world was a jumble of shadows and fear. All around, the forest seemed alive, the darkness twisting into intricate patterns, clawing at us from every angle. We barreled forward, the unseen terror right behind us. I could hear the snapping of branches, the rustling of leaves, the soft, horrifying moans escaping from the gaping void of its mouth. I froze for a second as I heard a chilling phrase that made my stomach drop. "Come back! Don't leave," it crooned in a voice dripping with malice. I pressed my hands to my ears, fighting the urge to look back. "Don't listen to it!" I screamed, my voice thin and desperate in the gloom. We had to push forward, had to break free somehow, away from this nightmare trying to consume us. With every ounce of strength in my legs, I lunged ahead, the crystal in my pocket pulsing with warmth, a constant reminder of the light we needed. "Focus on the light," I chanted, trying to drown out the darkness clawing at my sanity. Somewhere a glimmer of hope flickered in the chaos, urging us onward into the unknown depths. I couldn't let it fade, not now. With the girl at my side, I summoned my will and burst through the fog, plunging deeper into the heart of the forest. What awaited us there, I couldn't begin to imagine, but I knew that nowhere was safe. Shadows ran wild, and in the recesses of my mind, I could feel the weight of fear drawing closer with every step. But we had to try. With every heartbeat, we moved toward the abyss, preparing whatever we could muster to face the terror that awaited in the dark. As we plunged deeper, the fog thickened into something almost tangible, swirling around us, weighing down like a wet blanket. I struggled to breathe, each inhale feeling heavier than the last. Each breath tasted stale, mingling with the earthy smell of decaying leaves and the sickly sweet scent of the heavy mist. I could feel the shadows pressing in closer, almost crowding us, licking at the edges of our hurried steps. The trees became sentinels, their gnarled branches stretching out, scratching at the air, and I felt eyes on us, unseen, lurking in the blackness. Barely holding on to my courage, I squeezed the girl's hand tighter, a silent promise that we would keep moving forward together. "Is it getting colder?" she whispered, her voice shaking, pulling me from my thoughts. I could feel the chill biting through my clothes, seeping into my skin. I nodded, But it wasn't just the temperature that sent shivers racing down my spine. There was an undercurrent of something sinister in the air, a weight that made my skin crawl. A flicker of movement caught the corner of my eye. I turned, heart pounding, adrenaline spiking as I scanned the periphery of the fog. Shadows danced just out of reach, darting between the trees. I shook my head, hoping it was just my imagination playing tricks again. But then, I heard it, the unmistakable sound of something dragging across the forest floor. It echoed in the silence, growing closer. The soft scraping was mingled with another sound, a low, guttural chuckle that sent ice through my veins. It wasn't just the forest that was alive. Something wicked was playing a twisted game at our expense. "Keep running," I urged the girl, breaking into a sprint. The sound followed, faster now, growing louder, and I dared to look back. All I saw was mist, but the laughter haunted me, a cruel reminder that whatever was hunting us was toying with our fear. The ground dipped suddenly, and we stumbled down a small hill, grappling for balance. I could see an old stone path revealing itself through the foliage, crumbling and overgrown with weeds. I couldn't believe our luck, a possible way out. But as we reached the path, dread washed over me. Something felt off. The stones were slick with moss, the silent remnants of a sunken road leading deeper into the woods. I hesitated, heart pounding louder than ever. "Do we really want to go this way?" I asked her quietly, hoping she might have a better plan. She hesitated too, eyes darting left and right. "We have to go somewhere. We can't just stay here." I nodded, steeling myself against the mounting fear whispering in my ear. "So, we go," I said, determined to move forward. Together, we stepped onto the path, the mist swirling around us in angry walls of gray. The air felt electric, charged with something ancient that made the hair on my neck stand on end. As we walked, I felt each stone beneath my feet, each crack making me question the solidity of the ground. The further we traveled, the more the feeling of dread heightened, crawling under my skin. The laughter from behind fell silent, replaced by a low, sorrowful moan that echoed through the trees, forcing its way into my thoughts. "What is that sound?" the girl asked, glancing around wide-eyed. "I don't know," I replied, biting my lip. The sound was haunting, almost like a wail of those lost before us. It wrapped around me like a shroud, heavy with despair. Suddenly, the fog began to shift, swirling in patterns that seemed almost deliberate. I squinted against the spreading gloom, trying to see what lurked within. And then I saw it. A faint glow flickering deep within the trees, beckoning us closer. An unnatural light, shimmering against the shadowy backdrop, twinkling like a distant star desperate for attention. "Should we check it out?" she asked, a mix of curiosity and fear in her voice. I felt a strange pull to that light. "Maybe it's a way out," I said, though a part of me hesitated. Every fiber of my being was telling me to turn back, but something far stronger urged me to take a step forward. As we moved closer, the shadows seemed to retreat momentarily, retreating away from the aura of light. It felt inviting, a stark contrast to the dark chaos surrounding us. Just as we neared the edge of the clearing, a horrific shriek pierced the night, causing us to freeze in place. I turned, and what I saw made my blood run cold. A figure rose from the depths of the fog, impossibly tall and shadowy, its features obscured and grotesque. It towered over us, limbs stretching unnaturally as if the darkness itself had taken shape. It loomed closer, mouth agape in a silent scream, and I felt my heart race with raw terror. "Run!" I yelled, instinctually grabbing her wrist and pulling her towards the glow. We bolted, pushing ourselves harder than ever, adrenaline pumping through our veins. The figure chased after us, its presence a whirlwind of dark energy, sending frigid gusts that whipped against our backs like cold fingers urging us to hurry. The light drew near, and I prayed it wasn't an illusion, a trap laid by the very darkness that pursued us. But as we reached the clearing, the light burst before us, illuminating an ancient stone altar covered in vines. the glow pulsing rhythmically like a heartbeat. "Is this?" she started, disbelief and hope mingling in her voice. "I don't know," I admitted, fear still gnawing at my insides. The creature continued to close the distance, its laughter echoing through the air. "But we have to try." We rushed to the altar, stepping into the glowing light, feeling the warmth spread through us, but also a jarring sense of unease. I had no idea what power this altar held, but I could feel it pulsating through the earth, connecting with the depths of my fear and strength. "Help us!" I shouted, hands clasped over the stones, desperation spilling over. The shadows around us converged, a tidal wave of darkness crashing against the edge of the light. The figure faltered when it met the brightness, recoiling, and in that moment, I felt something shift within me. I recalled the warmth of the crystal in my pocket, the flicker of light within me. Pulling it out, I held it high, determined to keep the darkness at bay. "You can't have us. This is our fight." The energy surged, illuminating the clearing until the shadows shrank back, stretching to resist but unable to break through the protective light. The air vibrated with power. This was a moment of reckoning. With one deep breath, I shouted, "Enough!" The command rolled from my lips with power fueled by hope and desperation. The figure twisted, sounding a horrible scream as the brightness surged forward, washing over it, erasing the shadows inch by inch. Light spilled into the darkest corners, illuminating the forest around us, revealing the twisted paths we'd taken and the horrendous creatures lurking beyond. And just like that, I felt the suffocating grip of darkness begin to loosen. The forest shuddered as the shadows retreated, and the figures shrieked one final time before dissolving into the mist, the laughter mingling with the fading echoes as it slipped away forever. We stood there, breathless, heartbeats echoing in the silence that came after the storm. But even in that moment of victory, a shadow of uncertainty remained. The forest felt different, calmer, but an unsettling feeling lingered in the back of my mind, warning me that the forest was alive and that the darkness would always find a way back. "We did it," the girl whispered, staring at the fading light with awe. "Yes, but we can't let our guard down," I replied, scanning our surroundings. "We need to stay vigilant." With the glow dimming, I felt the resolve building inside me, a determination mingled with fear. As long as we held each other close, we could face whatever lay ahead in this twisted world. "Let's keep moving," I said finally, taking a step forward into the uncertain path ahead, where lights danced like stars guiding us through the dark. As we ventured further onto the stone path, the dim light continued to flicker behind us, its glow fading until it was barely a whisper in the darkness. I felt a shiver dance down my spine, the sense that eyes still watched us from the shadows. The forest was alive with sounds now, rustling leaves, distant animal calls, and an unsettling whisper that seemed to be carried on the wind. "Do you hear that?" I asked her, trying to keep my voice calm, though my heart raced at the thought of what might be lurking behind the trees. She nodded, fear etched in her face. "It's like someone is talking," she whispered back. The whispers grew louder, tangled words that twisted around our heads like a web. I couldn't make out the meaning, but the tone was clear. They were mocking, weaving tales of fear and despair. I tightened my grip around the crystal, its warmth still pulsing in my pocket, reminding me of the light we had found. "I just want to get out of here," I said, but my words felt futile against the oppressive atmosphere wrapped around us. I stepped forward, willing my legs to move faster despite the heavy air pressing down. But the further we walked, the more the trees closed in, their branches reaching for us like fingers grasping for a touch. I could see shapes flickering between the trunks, twisting up against the trunk, and I had to blink hard to convince myself it was just shadows, only shadows. Suddenly, one of the shapes drew closer, darting out from behind a tree. A pair of gleaming eyes reflected the faintest bits of light, watching us intently. It was animalistic yet wrong, the movement jerky and unnatural. I could feel my heart hammering against my ribcage, fear grappling with curiosity. "What is that?" she gasped, taking a step back. Before I could respond, the creature lunged forward. A small, twisted figure emerged from the shadows, half feral, half human. Its mouth twisted into a crooked grin, sharp teeth glinting in the fading light. The skin looked stretched and pale, glistening in a sickly sheen. "Run!" I shouted again, pushing her to take the lead. We zigzagged through the trees, the creature hot on our heels, shrieking with a sound that felt more like a warning bell than a cry of hunger. My thoughts raced as I felt the ground shift beneath me, rocks shifting like loose teeth. I could barely keep my footing as I glanced back. It was gaining ground. The laughter echoed behind, discordant and chilling, sending jolts of fear through my spine. I could hear the rapid beat of its feet against the earth, almost synchronized with my heart. "Where do we go?" she cried, panic setting in. "I don't know, just keep moving," I yelled, focusing on the escape, on anything but the creature threatening to overtake us. We stumbled into a thicket where the trees stood so closely together that the branches formed a natural cage, the darkness enveloping us like a suffocating cloak. I peeked through the gaps, searching for another bead of light, another chance to break free. The sound of our pursuer grew closer, branches snapping as it barreled toward us, caught in a fit of rage. "We can't hide here forever," I hissed, urgency bubbling in my chest. Glancing around, I spotted a narrow opening further along, almost hidden by tangled vines. "This way," I cried, pulling her toward it. We squeezed through, scraping our arms as we tore through the vegetation, desperate to escape. The way ahead was unclear, but I could hear the creature behind us growling, its frustration filling the air with a thick tension. The ground sloped downward, leading us into what felt like an underground passage. The air was cooler here, musty and wet, and I could hear the distant sound of dripping water. My instinct screamed that it was a trap, but there was no time to doubt. We had to keep moving. As we stepped into the dark tunnel, my heart raced, fear fighting against the creeping sense of dread. I could see faint glimmers on the walls, like old candles flickering to life. "What is this place?" I wondered aloud, my voice a whisper that bounced eerily off the damp stone. "I don't know, but it's creepy," she replied, her voice trembling. The path twisted through the cave, each turned deeper into darkness. I reached up and touched the stone walls, the cool surface grounding me for a moment. But that sense of safety faded as I heard it again, the growling, echoing through the passage, relentless, like a hungry beast. We hurried along, the walls closing in tighter, the shadows wrapping around us, suffocating the last remnants of light. There was a sense of urgency now, a feeling that whatever hunted us was closing the gap, drawn to the scent of fear wafting in the air like a feast. "Do you think it can follow us in here?" she asked, her eyes wide, fear flashing through her expression. "It has to," I replied, each word filled with uncertainty. "We need to find another way out. We can't be stuck here." Suddenly, a loud crash echoed in the darkness, followed by a growl that vibrated through the air like thunder. I yanked the girl forward, racing down the corridor, but now I could hear something else, too. A chorus of whispers rising from the walls, spectral voices entwining with the shadows around us. "You cannot escape," they taunted, and I felt the pull of panic rising in my throat. "I won't listen," I shouted, trying to drown out the disembodied voices that threatened to breach my senses. I pushed forward, my breath coming in quick gasps. Then we stumbled into a wide chamber illuminated by a ghostly blue light emanating from the ceiling, the shimmer reflecting off the wet stone like stars in a deep night sky. But that beauty was a facade. The walls were covered in strange symbols, swirling patterns that seemed to dance, vibrating with life. I could feel a force field buzzing in the air, a warning. But the brightness was almost inviting. "Should we stop?" she asked, trepidation in her voice. "No," I replied firmly, unable to shake the feeling that the shadows were still close behind us. Yet something compelling surged in this place, demanding we slow down, almost daring us to take a closer look at the markings. Before I could think too much, I spotted a narrow archway at the far side of the room. "Let's go there," I yelled, sprinting toward it. But as we neared, the whispers intensified, shaking through the air like a clarion call. Turn back, they hissed, their echo burrowing into my mind. My skin prickled at the sound, and I glanced back, instinctually searching for danger. That's when I saw it again. The creature had appeared at the edge of the chamber, its figure illuminated by the eerie blue light. It was more monstrous than before, twisted with shadows that wrapped around its limbs like dark silk. It moved with a sickening grace, advancing toward us, its hollow laughter filling the chamber again. "Run!" I screamed, urging her onward as I felt the icy grip of fear clutching my heart. We darted through the archway, the air growing colder as we entered yet another dark passage, a feeling of dread curling around us. The tunnel narrowed, the walls closing in on us. My breaths were quick and sharp, each one a frantic gasp fighting against the cold. The growls echoed again, louder, spinning around us in a frenzy, chasing us further into the unknown. "We'll find a way out," I insisted, though the words felt weak, an echo of my own fear that tangled around my thoughts. I had to believe it. A flicker of light caught my eye, and I lunged toward it, convinced it was the salvation we were desperately seeking. But as we sprinted toward the glow, I felt my foot catch on something. The ground itself seemed to snarl and bite back. I tumbled forward, the rush of air leaving my lungs as I fell into the cold stone floor. "Help!" I gasped, scrambling to my knees, looking back. The girl reached for me, but the shadows surged forward, enveloping her in darkness. The laughter returned, louder and more menacing, creeping into the cracks of my sanity as I struggled to push myself upright. I couldn't focus. Every breath felt like a battle as I grappled with the fear clutching at my throat. "Get up!" I yelled at myself, the urgency swelling inside me. I had to fight. I had to continue. For her. I turned back, fear coursing through my veins, ready to charge after her. But the shadows moved as if they were alive, swirling to block my way as they danced around in delight like they had an audience for this twisted play. Gunshots rang in the air, echoing through the darkness, and I froze momentarily, confusion mixing with hope. Who was it? What was happening? In that instant, I stood paralyzed, unsure whether the light was salvation or another trick of the shadows. Something primal surged within me. I sensed that if I hesitated any longer, it might be too late. I stepped deeper into the tunnel, aware that I was straying farther from safety, but driven by a reckless desperation to save her. I could feel the energy building, a force pressing against me, urging me to harness the power that lay ahead. There was no turning back now. I plunged into the darkness, prepared to confront whatever terror awaited on the other side. I pressed on, my heart pounding in sync with the distant growls that echoed through the twisted tunnel. The air grew thick around me, suffocating with fear and dread, but I couldn't turn back now. I felt her presence fade behind me, and the shadows clawed at my heels, eager to claim what was theirs. The glow I had spotted flickered further down the passage, a beacon in the murky darkness. With each step closer, I could feel a strange energy pulsing through the ground beneath me. My instincts kicked in, urging me forward while warning me to tread carefully. The walls were no longer just stone. They pulsed as if they were alive, the ancient markings shifting in patterns, swirling like liquid nightmares. Suddenly, I heard a voice, soft yet insistent, pulling at the edges of my mind. "Come closer," it whispered, a silky tone that sent ice through my veins. I hesitated, caught between a desperate need to escape and the haunting call that seemed to echo through the stone walls. The shadows writhed, stretching long and thin, reaching for me. "Stop!" I shouted into the emptiness, trying to drown out the siren call. The echoes responded with a cackle, dark laughter ringing in my ears. Against my better judgment, I stepped closer to the light, feeling an inexplicable draw pulling me in like a moth to a flame. As I rounded the corner, the passage opened wide into a cavern illuminated by that eerie glow. Crystals jutted from the walls, catching the light and reflecting it in a chaotic dance. But the beauty was a facade. In the center of the cavern stood a stone pedestal, covered in dark vines and pulsating with a sentient rhythm. I could feel the weight of many eyes on me, the shadows pressing against the walls like a hungry crowd, waiting for the right moment to pounce. I stepped into the cavern, drawn to the pedestal, confusion swirling in my mind. Why did it feel so familiar? Then I noticed the symbols etched into the pedestal, and recognition hit me like a wave. They looked like the markings on the walls of the tunnel, but they were different, sharper, more dangerous. A chill crawled down my back as I remembered the stories I'd heard about ancient rituals, about sacrifices made in dark places to appease unseen forces. Panic surged as I turned around, searching for the girl. "Where are you?" I shouted, my voice thick with fear. No answer came, only the oppressive silence, closing in like a vice. I could feel the shadows pooling around me, a reminder that time was slipping away. The pedestal throbbed with energy, sending tremors through the ground. "You must choose," the voice whispered again, echoing off the walls with a tantalizing pull. "Embrace it, unleash your fears, or remain trapped forever." I clenched my jaw, fighting the instinct to reach out and touch it. I knew I had to resist. Whatever power lay within the pedestal was not unlike the creature hunting me, a darkness that sought to consume every bit of light I had left. My heart raced as I turned back, looking for an exit, but the walls seemed to contort, shifting with each blink, and the path back felt as twisted as the fear coiling in my gut. Suddenly, a burst of light erupted from the pedestal, flooding the cavern with radiant energy. In that blinding moment, the shadows recoiled, ever watchful, and I could hear the whimpers. It was as if the darkness was being banished, just as quickly as it had approached. But as the light pulsed, I felt something shift within me. Pain shot through my veins, icy fingers gripping my limbs, and the laughter returned, louder, more mocking. I staggered back against the wall, my heart pounding so loud it echoed against the stone. I could feel them closing in, waiting, watching, their whispers growing ever more frantic, hungry for fear, and I could almost see shapes flickering at the corners of my vision. Desperation flooded my senses, and I knew I had to make a choice. I took a deep breath and closed my eyes, willing myself to draw on every ounce of strength I had left. "I will not let you control me," I shouted into the void, my voice trembling but fierce. With sheer force of will, I broke my gaze from the pedestal, focusing instead on the archway leading out. I bolted towards it, the shivering energy of the cavern prickling against my skin as if it were a living entity fighting to pull me back. I could feel the shadows chasing right behind, heavy with the darkness they carried, their laughter growing louder, chasing me as I sprinted for the light ahead. As I reached the archway, a force slammed against me, throwing me off balance. I stumbled forward, but regained my footing just in time to burst through the opening. The moment I crossed over, it felt like breaking a spell. The shadows flared and screamed in fury, their cries echoing as I lunged into the blinding light. My feet pounded against the ground as I ran, breathless and terrified, desperate to escape the horrors still hot on my trail. The light began to fade into a thick fog, wrapping around me in tendrils, and I found myself back in the forest, the trees towering ominously, twisted and gnarled. I turned to look behind me, half expecting to see the creature looming there in wait, but there was nothing. Only stillness surrounded me, and for a fleeting moment, I thought I'd left it all behind. But the whispering started again, a low hum that vibrated in the air. I looked at the twisted trunks, the shadows flickering through the leaves. Something was still here, lurking, waiting for me to let my guard down. "Where are you?" I shouted again, searching for the girl, but the only response was the dull rustle of leaves and the oppressive silence that swallowed my voice whole. In the distance, I could see a glimmering of light filtering through the trees, something different from before. It seemed inviting, but I didn't dare trust it. My instincts grilled me to move quickly, but the dread crawled beneath my skin, and I hesitated. "No more games," I muttered to myself. Whatever was pushing, it wouldn't catch me off guard again. Anyway, I had to find her. I couldn't leave her behind. So I pressed through the darkness, every inch feeling like a step deeper into a pit. I could hear the laughter grow faint, but the whispers remained, twisting like a cold wind weaving through the branches. "You can't escape. You are one of us now," they murmured, chilling my soul. With every step, I felt the pull of the mysterious glow, an urge to follow it despite the growing trepidation in my gut. It thrummed with a warmth that seemed to beckon and pull me into its embrace. I picked up speed, forcing myself to run, my breath quickening as the trees parted ahead, revealing a small clearing bathed in ethereal light. In the center stood an exquisite figure, a woman cloaked in shimmering white that caught the light. Her eyes gleamed with wisdom, yet held an unsettling darkness. "Welcome," she said, her voice soothing but edged with something sharp. "Who are you?" I managed to ask, my voice barely above a whisper. "I am the keeper of these woods," she replied, stepping closer. "You've come a long way, haven't you? To the heart of fear." I shivered, feeling tiny under her gaze. "I'm looking for someone. A girl. She was with me." Her smile widened, revealing the sharpness of her teeth. "Ah, yes. You will find her soon enough." The air crackled with tension as I took a step back, instinctively feeling the pull of danger. "What do you want?" "Have you ever wondered," she mused, tilting her head, "what it means to truly embrace your fears?" Her words hung in the air, thick with potential, and my heart raced as shadows crept closer, lurking just out of sight. I felt the ground tremble beneath me as the laughter returned, mingling with the whispers. They were encroaching, ready to envelop me once again. This was no ordinary encounter. I could sense something beyond the veil of her beauty and grace. Something darker lay beneath. I backed away slowly, trying to find my footing, but the shadows loomed ever closer, and I knew I had to figure out how to escape this nightmare before it consumed everything I held dear. I felt the shadows grow eager, hungry to claim me as I stood frozen, caught in the grip of the woman's gaze. Every instinct screamed at me to flee, to escape this place that thrummed with dark energy. Yet a strange calm surrounded me, almost as if the shadows were waiting, holding back just long enough for me to make my choice. "Don't be afraid," she said, her voice flowing like honey, sweet yet laced with poison. "Embrace who you are meant to be." A wave of energy washed over me, and for a moment, I felt a connection, like I belonged here, like the darkness was an old friend welcoming me home. I shook my head, fighting the sensation, the warmth that made my skin crawl. "No, I am not like you," I yelled, drowning in the fear that threatened to suffocate me. The shadows seemed to stir, sensing my defiance, a wave of cold laughter echoing through the clearing. Her smile faded, replaced by something harsher. "You cannot resist forever. You will choose, and you will join us." I felt my heart quicken, the dread of what was to come filling my stomach with ice. I knew this would be a battle for my soul, and I couldn't back down. I turned, ready to run when sudden darkness enveloped me. A wave crashed over my senses, and I could hear the whispering growing louder, intertwining in a chaotic symphony of terror. "Join us, give in," the chorus sang, shrill voices intertwining and drowning out my thoughts. Shadows reached for me, wrapping around my ankles, tugging me back toward the pedestal of darkness. "No!" I shouted, tearing myself free from their grasp. I could feel the energy pooling in my hands, a faint glow igniting within me, pushing against the shadows that swirled hungrily. In that moment, I knew I had to fight back, to sever the hold they had on me. With all my strength, I thrust my hands forward, directing the energy toward the stone pedestal. A surge of pure light exploded forth, piercing through the darkness and illuminating the cavern with a blinding brilliance. The shadows screamed, recoiling as if scalded by fire. I could feel the air shift, the weight of fear lifting as the light spread. The woman snarled, rage twisting her features, but I was not afraid. "This ends now," I declared, the energy surging through me like a wildfire, burning away the tendrils of darkness that sought to entrap me. I charged, focusing everything I had into releasing my fear, my pain, and all that heeded to those dark whispers. The shadows fought back, clawing and snapping, echoing with rage and despair. But I shoved the light forward harder, the pulse growing stronger with each heartbeat, and for every scream of the darkness, I felt myself pushing against it even harder. The stones beneath me trembled, shaking as I unleashed the light. The pedestal shattered in an explosion of energy, dazzling brilliance shooting into the air and tearing through the fog of shadows. I could sense their grip weakening, the echoes of their fury fading like a distant nightmare. With a final cry, the last of the shadows evaporated, whipped away by the brilliant light. The woman's form flickered, her expression shifting between horror and disbelief as she transformed into a cloud of darkness, dissipating into the air with a furious howl. I stood breathless, the glow fading as calm returned to the cavern. I could hardly believe what had just happened. I had fought the darkness and won, but as the shadows cleared, a new silence enveloped me. But where was the girl? I scanned the clearing, hope building in my chest, even as doubt began to creep back in. "I am here!" I shouted again, desperation tinged heavy in my voice. But the only answer was the soft rustling of leaves in the distance, the whispering wind. Dread wrapped around me like a heavy blanket as I moved cautiously through the clearing, the echoes of laughter and whispers still haunting the edges of my mind. It felt like the woods had shifted once more, a living entity filled with lurking darkness, only waiting for an opportunity to seize the shadows back. Suddenly, I saw a flicker of movement to my right, a familiar figure stepping into view. Relief surged through me as I dashed toward her, but my heart dropped when she turned. Her eyes were empty voids, swirling with a pitch-black darkness that seemed to hum with an unnatural energy. "What happened?" I gasped, the words choking me as I tried to fathom her hollow expression. "I found my place," she whispered, her voice soft yet layered with an eerie echo. "You should join me." I felt my stomach drop as the realization hit. The shadows hadn't just receded. They had seeped into her, twisting her very essence. I stepped back, horror gripping me as she smiled, the twisted glee in her eyes sending a shudder through my body. I turned to run, but the ground trembled again, like a heartbeat echoing through the earth. The shadows reemerged, writhing like snakes, strategically closing in. The laughter rang out again, cruel and mocking, whispering of my imminent doom. "No!" I screamed, pushing through the onslaught of fear. I wouldn't let them take me. I sprinted toward the archway, my breath coming in quick gasps as the darkness clawed at my heels. Behind me, I could hear her voice rising, layered with that haunting echo, merging with the laughter of the shadows. "You can't escape. You are already one of us," it taunted, the words slithering into my mind, looking for cracks to break me. I burst through the archway, breathless and terrified, and stumbled onto the forest floor. The morning light broke through the trees, illuminating the path ahead, but the shadows lingered just out of reach, watching, waiting for the moment I would let my guard down. The realization struck me hard. I would never be free from this darkness. It would always be there, just waiting in the corners of my mind, whispering its seductive call. I was forever hunted, a shadow of myself, haunted by what I had faced and what I had lost. No matter where I went, fear would follow. I had escaped the creature, but the woods know my name. The shadows have marked my soul, and the darkness is always lurking just outside the light. I took one last look back, the lingering whispers echoing in the stillness of the forest, a reminder that the battle might be over, but the war for my soul was just beginning.